Good evening. I hereby call to order the March 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Gaithersburg Historic District Commission. For our roll call, please answer present when I call your name. Planner 2, Chris Berger.
Present.
Community Planning Manager, Greg Mann.
Present.
Sorry, Greg, I didn't realize. Assistant City Attorney, Eric Perla.
Present.
Alternate Commissioner, Olivier Cote.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner and Vice Chairman, John Roddy.
Present.
Commissioner, Mary Jo LaFrance.
Present.
Commissioner, Mark Feinstein.
Present.
Commissioner, Rudy Morgan.
Present.
Myself, Commissioner, and Chairman Dean Ventola says present. We have a quorum, and Commissioner Cote's role tonight is as an alternate commissioner. Next is our preliminary statement, which is as follows. The Commission is empowered to meet and act under Article 12 of the City Code of Gaithersburg. The technical qualifications of the staff of this Commission and the members of this Commission are on file with the City of Gaithersburg, are available on request to any applicant, and are hereby made a part of any legal record of each and every application heard today. Each application heard today is considered on its own merits and is not to be considered as establishing precedent for any other application. Okay, does anyone have any conflicts of interest of any application being heard tonight? If so, please verbally indicate so. I think John,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to say that I have a declaration to make. I believe that our second item on the agenda, HIST 9233-2022, has as its applicant the Susan Zanner. Is she here this evening? I'm assuming that you are the daughter of Dr. Zanner. Yeah. Okay. For anyone who has been in the city for any length of time, the Zanners were a very prominent family here, not only because of his professional association as a dentist, but also their charitable and civic participation. In short, they're the kind of folk that any community really wants as their citizens, and it was a shame that we lost him just a year or two ago.
Thank you.
I say all of this to say that the Zanners at one time owned the house that I currently live in, 105 South Summit. I've been there for 48 years. I don't think this connection is going to change my viewpoint in any way in any of the matters that are before us this evening. So I submit that as my declaration.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Is there anyone else who needs to make any declaration?
No.
No? Okay, very good. We do not have any minutes to review tonight. So let's go right to the issues at hand. So next we have two historic area work permit reviews, HAWPs. The first one being HIST 9232-2022, which is the installation of a 6-foot tall board-abutting-board fence in the rear yard and a 3-foot tall picket fence in the front yard of 605 Steinbeck Avenue in the MXT Mixed-Use Development Zone. May we have an introduction from staff?
Yep. Good evening. This is a historic area work permit for HIST 9232-2022, requesting approval to install a new fence for the property located at 605 Steinbeck Avenue. In accordance with sections 24-227A of the City Code, a HOP is required for any work on public or private property that would affect the historic, archaeological, or architectural significance of a designated structure or historic resource. The Historic District Commission must render its decision based on the factors pursuant to section 24-2227.2A of the City Code. The property is located within the Crown subdivision. It is zoned MXD. The subject property was annexed into the city as part of the larger Crown development in 2006. The home and the associated outbuildings, as well as the environmental setting, were historically designated in 2008 by the Mayor and City Council in conformance with the requirements of the annexation agreement by Resolution HD-01-08. The Historic District Design Guidelines for the Brooks, Russell, and Walker Historic District and individual designated sites apply to this property. The area of the designation has since been divided into two parcels. The subject property is located on a 16,421 square foot lot, which was subdivided from the larger property in 2011 as part of Plat 24317. The remaining 130,635 square foot parcel C, which will be the future city park, was also platted in 2011 as part of Plat 24318. The England Crown Crown Manor House is a 2.5-story Gothic Revival-style farmhouse that was constructed circa 1894. The 5-bay house is clad with stucco and is covered with a cross-gable roof covered in both metal shingles and crimped metal. The front porch has ornate scrollwork. A number of additions have been constructed at the west elevation. 2 outbuildings, the shed and tenant house, are located on the same parcel as the residence. The other outbuildings included in the designation are located on the abutting future City Park property. I will now turn the presentation over to the property owners to present the application and answer any questions you may have, and staff is also available to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you so much. Well, welcome to you. Please state your name.
My name is Sarah.
My name is Amos.
Okay, are you both at 605 Steinbeck?
We are.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. My apologies. This is our first time here, as we are new residents to Gaithersburg, so we are new to all of this. And we also didn't actually expect to be going forward with this hearing, so we only started preparing very, very recently. So my apologies if this is not the most coherent of statements, but I will do my best.
Do not worry. Anything that you need to relay to us, we're going to welcome it.
I appreciate that. All right. So on page 24 of the historic guidelines, it states the importance of guidelines to the district's success, and that the vigor of the district and the processes has depended on effective implementation of the guidelines for the historic district. The design guidelines required by law as part of the preservation process and implemented according to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation are vital to managing change as the district enters another century. They also protect property owners by making sure that historic area work permit applications are reviewed in a systemic and equitable manner. I am one of those property owners. I'm new, as I said, but I've lived in historic homes for the majority of my life, and I've lived on and managed farms in Montgomery County for several years. My partner has also worked on farms and is currently a branch chief at the Farm Protection and Conservation Agency, and his team contributes to the preservation and protection of farms across the United States from development and encroachments. He grew up in a 1760s farmhouse and currently owns a historic home locally in Virginia. We both take pride in maintaining the integrity of historic homes. We're very excited to join this community. Unfortunately, we're now completely disheartened by the aggression we've received related to what we consider to be a very simple request for a fence that provides basic security and privacy while maintaining the sightlines throughout the park and the community due to the home and outbuildings, elevation, location, and in respect to the proposed path fence. We have to continue to remind ourselves that the Crown Farm development that surrounds our home is designated for 2,250 residential units. So in reality, the numbers against this application are minuscule and not representative of the larger majority. In fact, we have had multiple community members approach us with positive comments about the proposed change in fence type, some of which are in exhibits. For example, one by, I believe, a Miss Dutton. We hope the HDC will review with fresh eyes as our application strictly abides by the historic guidelines without exception. Page 26 through 27 of the historic guidelines detail very explicitly the fence type, height, and location. Fences should be a simple wooden picket or wrought iron of simple design visible from the street, or for rear yards only, post and wire, board abutting board, open 3-rail fence, or open board-on-board. Masonry walls, split rail, chain link, or barbed wire fences are not permitted. Maximum height of fences and hedges are as follows: facing the street 3 feet, side yard 3 to 6 feet, rear yards up to 6 feet. Exceptions will be considered on a case-by-case basis for reasons of topography, etc. There are also pictures of all the allowable fence types. Page 28 diagrams that rear yard fences are, quote, acceptable to the front corner of the house. Our application asks for a 3-foot picket fence in the front yard and a 6-foot board-abutting-board fence in the backyard in strict adherence with the historical guidelines and section 241673 of City Code. We feel this is very important as the fence currently installed is a split rail fence, which is explicitly prohibited in the historic guidelines. We're genuinely confused as to why staff would recommend keeping this non-conforming fence as part of their conditional approval. In efforts to maintain the open feel and to respect our neighbors, we've only asked for the rear fence to extend to the back of the house on the right side as opposed to the front of the house, despite that allowance in the historic guidelines. Additionally, when asked by staff, we immediately removed the driveway gate, Exhibit 19, without question, despite the fact that the historic guidelines actually do not speak specifically to gates. So this may have been easily accepted as a gray area, particularly since historic photos, Exhibit 13, appear to show a fully enclosed perimeter fence at this very farmhouse. Finally, we are also willing to stain the fence white to ensure uniformity and aesthetic cohesiveness, despite that not being required by the historic guidelines. Staff recommends a privacy fence at our deck, which Staff recommends a privacy fence at our deck, which shows that there is a recognized need for privacy. The public land extends behind our property, so the proposal does not actually even provide privacy on that small area of our yard. Moreover, though, we feel this is wholly insufficient to relegate our privacy needs to a postage stamp equivalent in our own yard, as we purposefully purchased a home on nearly 0.4 acres because we intend to use and enjoy having the space. We understand that must be balanced with the needs of others, which is why we extended the lower picket fence to the back of the house on the right side, which allows for the more open field described, as well as the beautiful view of the farmhouse from the street. We are unsure why the staff report and neighbors assume our need for privacy and a privacy fence is only to contain pets. We do have small animals that need to be contained, yes, but that is not at all the only reason for the fence. We have private religious practices that are performed outside. There are also major security and liability concerns with an open fence, particularly one that abuts public land. For example, the city has plans to turn the public land into a dog park, potentially. A dog could reach through and bite a toddler on our property. Another plan the city has is for the park to be a children's play area. And in that case, a child could reach through and startle one of our animals and be injured, and we could be held liable for that. I really enjoy fostering dogs and training to be service animals, and the organization will not allow fosters who do not have a 6-foot-tall solid fence to remain in the program due to liability concerns for this very reason. A third possibility is that an adult could reach through an open fence for other nefarious purposes. Unfortunately, sight lines do lead to crimes of opportunity. That's why we're all told to lock our valuables in our trunks. And our family, unfortunately, has been the victim of multiple violent crimes, including kidnapping and stabbing by strangers. We require a place that we can feel safe, and a board-abutting-board fence gives us that needed peace of mind. A few weeks after obtaining possession of the home, we installed a security camera on the front porch and have submitted a sample of footage for your review as seen as in Exhibit 25. You will note that numerous people were cupping their hands and peering through our windows for extended periods of time. I'd like to note that you can't see from the angle, but none of these people actually go to the door. They don't knock. They go straight to peering through windows. We have personally witnessed, an additional note would be that half of those windows go directly into our primary bedroom. We have personally witnessed people also in our side and backyard despite the current open fence. This makes us extremely uncomfortable. We are ordering blinds, but everything's extremely back ordered due to supply chain issues. But this is notable because an open fence is much like an open window or a clear window without a blind. And the open fence that the staff proposes will likely result in the unacceptable behavior that's happening continuing. With the fences proposed by staff, there is nothing stopping individuals from utilizing the public park to similarly stare at us in our backyard, since if people are willing to do that blatant, obvious staring from a public street, I hate to think what they would continue to do with more privacy. We would also like to address the contention that fencing disrupts the flow of the Crown neighborhood and therefore is alleged to be in conflict with Gaithersburg City Code 24227A. It is noticeable that the Crown neighborhood 1 and 2 design guidelines allow for fencing, including backyard privacy fences, as you can see in Exhibit 18. Therefore, it is also entirely consistent with the neighborhood to have such a fence. No, it's fine. You don't need it. I would also like to state the obvious, which is that our home stands out in Crown due to many, many reasons, least of which would be a fence. We are of the notion that diversity is not a negative. It's a unique property, and that's what we love about it. It's also notable that Crown Farm contains 2,250 residential units, or is at least intended to, and is one of the most densely packed areas in Montgomery County. Next, we will address the contention that the proposed fence will disrupt the cohesiveness of the entire historic farm parcel in supposed opposition to Section 24227.2A3. It should first be noted that the property was divided into 2 parcels, as there seems to be some confusion, that we hope the fence will help in increased understanding in the neighborhood of the distinction, as there is a public land and there is a private residence now. And during that division, the parcel line could have been drawn many ways. Easements could have been included. Historic buildings have even been relocated in these kinds of circumstances. We believe the property line was chosen purposefully and that this was not a fluke or error, but in actuality was a decision made by very well-informed individuals who realized that historically the homestead was seen in many ways as distinctly separate from farming operations. Exhibit 13 depicts just that by showing the perimeter fence around the entire homestead, separating the dwelling units from the agricultural units. This distinction is also seen in the present day via the materials of our home and outbuildings, as well as the color versus the historic buildings on the public land, stucco and logs as opposed to cinder blocks and boards, white as opposed to red, as you can see in Exhibit 27, the cinder block building. Our proposed perimeter fence with opening at the drive would remain true to the historic nature of the farm by retaining the natural break between homestead dwelling units and the exterior agricultural buildings. It would in no way be creating a novel barrier, but rather meld into the historical context quite easily. Homesteads are critical in U.S. history and distinguish us from our past in Europe. There are peer-reviewed works that detail the importance of fencing throughout U.S. history, including farms in the 19th century. A fence is not in opposition to the historical value in any way. The historic owners obviously valued perimeter fencing, even when the surrounding property belonged to the owners themselves and even when they had no neighbors in eyesight to worry about privacy or security. Notably, there are different styles and placement of fencing seen in the historic photos if you compare exhibits 7 and 13. This allows for growth such that the land can be used for the purposes of the current owner. Now we come to the issue of sightlines and the supposed nonconformance with section 24227.2A1. First, I would like to emphasize, though, that our goal is in no way to block sightlines to any historic structures. We love history, and we want to share it with people. It should be recognized that privacy fences do not automatically equate to blocking sightlines, and does not in this particular case. Given the elevation and profile of the land, the privacy fence will not inhibit anyone enjoying the public land from viewing at least 3/4 and really more, that's a conservative estimate, of the historic structures. We really urge the HDC to think about this critically and to review the topography, packet, page 19. If you need assistance, we can probably ask.
Right, because there's an original packet, and then there's these.
Page 19.
Hold on.
Apologies. Would you mind helping us find the
Oh, no,
topography?
so
19?
It's the original, yeah,
No,
the
it was
original.
on this, but there was a packet that was put out, and then everything got changed again, so it was page 19 of the original packet.
There's the top.
Okay. One more. It's not gonna let me.
Mind if I drag real
Yeah.
fast?
Should I just continue?
Wait.
Oh.
Whatever you prefer, please. If you want to, we could wait a little bit longer.
Thank you.
Just gotta get to page 19.
It's 25.
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So, as I said, we really urge the HDC to think about this topography critically and to review this map as the home sits up from where the placement of the fence will be. So this focus on the interrupted sight lines in the staff report is misguided. To put this in perspective, in order to enter the home from any entrance, you must walk up several stairs, equating to approximately 2.5 to 3 feet. This is in addition to the fact that the land slopes away from both the farmhouse and the log house, such that the fence is slightly over an additional foot below the base of the foundation of the structures, as you can see in the topographic map.
So for clarification, what I'm highlighting kind of comes in here is actually one of the topographic lines. If you look here at the second outline that I'm making, this is actually a drop in the elevation of the house. So as you move away from the home, there's a several foot drop. So the fence on the property line is actually several feet below the start of the house, and the house itself sits up on about a 2.5 to 3 foot foundation, which puts it even higher. So the house really does sit above the property.
And I can testify that if going into the log house, it's also a very big step up there as a short person. Anywho. And the elevation change is even more drastic on the side of Salk Circle. Due to these reasons, we genuinely think the argument calling for an open fence design is more theoretical in need than practical in this case. Thus, the privacy fence as submitted will truly give us many benefits of peace of mind in exchange for very little loss, equating to essentially 1 or 2 feet from the public's gaze on the structure, and that's really just of the foundation. In fact, one could easily argue for height variance as suggested in the historic guidelines. But that is not something we seek, as our goal is only to provide us with basic security and privacy, not to restrict sightlines. A 6-foot privacy fence is a standard height for a reason. It provides privacy for the average height of a human. Its intent, purpose, and effect is not to provide privacy to buildings, which are much, much taller at, in this case, 2.5 stories. Finally, we'd like to address a significant issue in this process where we as homeowners were transparent with the city about our needs prior to putting in an offer and purchasing this property. We worked closely with staff regarding our plans upon purchase. Exhibit 19 illustrates staff's revision to our application. It clearly states, remove driveway gate as discussed, as well as a comment that one of our photos appears to be a vinyl fence, best not to use this photo. However, very notably, there is no mention as to a need to change the proposed board-abutting-board fence style in any way. We were completely caught off guard when the staff report was released, as we thought the staff was completely satisfied with our revised application. We were strongly under the justified impression that staff believed the wood, as opposed to vinyl, as seen above, board-abutting-board fence proposal was in complete conformance with City Code 24227.2A4, and still contend that it is, as it is explicitly allowed under the historic guidelines. We want to be very clear how much sleep has been lost over this matter since Friday. And as our feelings of insecurity in our new home grow, we are faced with the devastating outlook that if we cannot feel a basic sense of privacy and security for our family, we'll be forced to repack our boxes. This is incredibly sad, and we will exhaust all options and hope for the home, as returning it to a vacant state is not in the best interest of the property, despite the fact that a small percentage of the neighbors seem to likely prefer it to remain a vacant extension of parkland. This property has already lost one owner before us in a very short period of time. So I'd like to reiterate the section on page 24 of the historic guidelines entitled "The Importance of Guidelines to the District's Success." The guidelines are to, quote, manage change, and, quote, to protect property owners by making sure that historic work permit applications are reviewed in a systemic and equitable manner. I contend that going against the explicitly written guidelines would be in direct opposition of this purpose, and I urge the HDC to approve the explicitly allowed application presented to you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir, would you like to add anything to that before we go to the public?
I don't think there's much I could add to that.
It was very good. Thank you so much. You did great. Thank you. Okay, then next then is we can hear from the public. The public is invited to speak. So if anyone is in support or in opposition of this hawk, please come up to the podium and state your name and the district you live in and begin to say.
Thank you. My name is Martin Schaefer. I live at 447 Salk Circle. My house backs up. The back of my house abuts the tin metal corn storage facility. I am in opposition to this application. I have some sympathy for your security and privacy issues, but this is a historic issue and not a security and privacy issue. I submitted a written opposition, which you all hopefully will or have or will read. But I thought that there were two issues that needed some additional emphasis. The first one is that the historic designation for this property was granted to the entire site. It was not granted to the two parcels that make up the site. It was granted to the entire site as one historic designation. And the historic designation included specifically all the buildings. I wasn't at the hearing, but I have read the resolution, and apparently at that time, the commissioners were concerned that this would include all of the structures that were on the site, including the farm house. There was no attempt to segregate, differentiate the farmhouse from all of the other buildings. The proposal we're talking about today puts a 6-foot privacy fence between the farmhouse and the rest of those buildings. The corn crib, I call it a corn crib, it's not a corn crib, it's a corn storage facility, can't be more than 50 feet from that house. These structures are all very close to the house. By putting a privacy fence between those structures and the farmhouse, I believe you're doing a terrible disservice to the historic nature of this property. People are going to be, at some point, we hope, walking around parkland that surrounds this property. The parkland, as part of the historic site, should be able to appreciate that this is one historic site, house, farm property, and not see that here's the farm property and then privacy fence and a totally unrelated house there. I also, on my second point, the proposed fencing, the Gaithersburg City Code and other standards of review emphasize the fact that you shouldn't be doing something that is out of character with the community. There was some discussion about why the back of the house is different than the front of the house. That the street view should. My 3 minutes is up?
Yes, sir.
Can I finish this one
Please do.
sentence?
Yes,
that
please
the
do.
street view should be different from the back of the house. The street view on this house, once that park is operational, is going to be same front and back. You're going to have people walking in back. You're going to have people walking in front. The standards clearly state it's not necessarily, it's not specific to the National Park Service standards, the City of Gaithersburg Code, or any other standards that are around. The street view is supposed to be open. And in my estimation, that would mean that the back of this house, because of the public nature of the park behind it, ought to be open too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone next?
Good evening.
Welcome. Please state your
Excuse
name.
the attire, we just got back from Pittsburgh,
Okay, thank
so
you.
we came straight here.
Thank
So,
you. Please state your name and the district you live in.
my name is Oscar Pineda, and I live across the way from them at 444 Salt Circle. I have been in construction for about 32 years. The name of my company is Historic Restoration Incorporated. So needless to say, I'm a little bit familiar with what's going on with our historic structures. I've had the pleasure of working with the Trust for Historic Restoration in DC, fine arts, got to meet a lot of wonderful people. In my youth, I didn't really like being imposed what I could do and what I couldn't do, especially when the building owner wanted to do whatever they wanted to do. And we went to fine arts and they said, nay, you can't do that. So the house is a beautiful house. No question about that. We have no issue with the fence. What we have issue is with the type of fence that they are proposing to build. I believe that the fence must be architecturally congruent with the structure. And the fence that I have seen does not do the house justice. We have very few historic homes and very few historic structures in this area. And we need to take care of what we have and try to keep it original. I want to address a couple of other things. The privacy issue. I don't think any of us feels threatened in our neighborhood. People walk at all hours of the day, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Dogs, children. I mean, people walk at all times. If you take a little drive by our neighborhood, it's easy to drive that section of the neighborhood because it's a horseshoe. It's open. It's wide open. Now, peeking into the house, they can all tell you we had to request signs that said private residence because people know that a house is being built. Everybody knew this house was being renovated. So people were curious. They walked up to see what was going on. I think that's what it's all about. The other thing, and it's more of an issue with water. Part of the fence is midway up a hill. A solid fence would disrupt the flow of water. This water comes down into a ditch that they provided there, so the water goes into the containment ponds. So, as I said, I personally have no issue with the fence. It's the type of fence. Privacy, I've never had any concerns. Otherwise, we wouldn't be living there. People work there at all hours of the day. And from my perspective, working on some of the most beautiful buildings in DC and working on some of the buildings that we have here, even in Old Town Gettysburg, we have to do justice to the structures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone next? Welcome. Please state your name and the district you live in.
Yeah, hi. My name is Joseph Sun. I live at 485 Sark Circle, right next to the farmhouse. First of all, I would like to welcome the new owners of the farmhouse, Amos and Sarah, to the Crown community. It's always exciting to meet new neighbors, and we were looking forward to meeting you. We just wanted to be friendly and welcoming, of course, just like everyone else did when we moved into the house a couple of years ago. However, the notice about the proposal to erect a 6-foot privacy fence in extremely close proximity to my house and my neighbors was truly shocking to us. It was only a few steps away from the deck and back of my house to the fence if it is built, and would block our view of the farmhouse and the farmland, of course, from our living room. We bought the current house because we love the peaceful view of the farm land behind us. We were told by the builder that there could be no change around the farmhouse since it's a historic property. Obviously, that wasn't true. However, instead of the farmland, now we have a garage and a driveway that we have to look at from our kitchen and our living room. But we didn't oppose the proposal to build a garage and a driveway at the time simply because we understood that the new owner of the farmhouse would need it. Did we like it? No way. But we were reasonable people and totally understood why the owner would want a garage and driveway, which we all have, you know. However, the current proposal to erect this tall privacy fence behind my house and my neighbors is very inconsiderate and unfriendly to the existing homeowners. I hope you understand how this will impact our quality of life and interfere with the joy of our small outdoor space and with our view of the farmland. In addition, the newly proposed high, solid fence would be inconsistent with openness in the neighborhood and the historic appearance of the farmhouse. We understand that the farmhouse is not a part of Crown HOA, but is in the middle of the neighborhood, and no other homes in Crown are surrounded by privacy fences. Such a fence would be unsightly and feel unfriendly for sure. Our properties are located down the slope from the farmhouse, and the 6-foot fence will felt much higher and obstruct our view. And all we will see is the wall behind us. And the proposal says that there will be a transition from a 3-foot picket fence to a 6. It's going to be just one more minute. I'm sorry. 6-foot fence right behind my house. No matter how the transition is carried out, it will look. It's not going to look good. And we are going to be the ones looking at it every day. We understand that the main goal of this proposal was to keep the pets in the backyard safely, and this can be done by retaining the current split rail fencing, which can be modified with the installation of wire to protect the pets, as suggested in the staff reports. I would like to finish by quoting the saying, "Good fences make good neighbors." We would like to be good, friendly neighbors to the new owners and develop a relationship that can be enjoyed and lasting. Whether this proposal is approved or not this evening, I hope you understand our concerns and make the right decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone next? Feel free. Hello, welcome. State your name and your district.
My name's Linda Lynn, and my husband Ray and I live at 481 Sauk Circle. next to Joe and Sophia, the gentleman that just spoke. We're adjacent to the property, the second from the corner. And I just want to echo on what he had said in that we do live lower than the beautiful farmhouse. And so we will, in effect, have a barrier going right outside our property, right outside our deck and screened-in porch. And obviously, that's not the best for us. So we understand that the new owners needed a fence and the driveway and the garage. And when that was approved, we were curious, but of course we didn't oppose it because we understand there are neighbors and they need those same things that we need. But now this is really going to affect others. It creates a barrier, and so that's what I really wanted to stress to you all. So thank you for your consideration in that matter.
Thank you very much. Anyone next, please feel free.
Name's Bob Cusack, 473 Salt Circle. I'm a little bit behind the house there. I'm from Kansas, moved here, so I didn't grow up on a farm, but I appreciate the farm. That's one of the reasons that we really enjoyed buying our house was this farm structure up there. And it is a great looking house, and especially it's been renovated. You know, someone else bought, I believe someone bought it and they flipped it. They renovated the inside and had the fence and they flipped it, and these folks bought it. The split rail fence fits really nicely around it. The 1940 aerial shot they had up there, that's they show that fence, but the fence is right along the side of the house. It's not on the property line, and that would be, the 6-foot fence would be totally out of character for our community. It would look like a compound all the way around it. We want to see, if there's going to be a fence, a split rail type fence that's close to the house so you can enjoy the view of the home is really important to folks. If you were to see, I mean, when I was walking down to go enjoy Crown, and I saw Joe down there, and I said, "What's with the fence?" I thought the fence was going to be maybe a 6-foot fence up by the railing. I thought, well, that's still pretty obstruction, that's the type of height of the fence. But then I saw the stakes where they were. If you need to see a photo where those stakes are, what they're even proposing. They are literally 3 or 4, maybe 5 feet tops from the back of someone's deck. Joe's deck would be right there. It's ridiculous. That's the property line. Up there where the top of the hill, that makes sense. That's why I'm not opposed to the fence where they have it. I think they can. I have 2 dogs. I built something underneath my deck to keep my dogs down there. I didn't, because we were not allowed to have fences in the HOA. I know this is a part of the HOA, but that's my 2 cents. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. Anyone else? Please feel free. Okay, I see and hear no one. Okay, yes, please. Welcome.
Thank
Please
you.
state your name.
My name is Susan Cusack, and I'm at 473 Salt Circle as well. I'm Bob's wife. We moved in 5 years ago. Again, we picked the lot because of the view of the farm and everything. But I'm just letting you know that, I guess, 4 years ago or 3 years ago in 2018, Mr. Duvall, who wrote a book on Crown Farm, he presented a whole afternoon about the history of Crown, and some of the family was there, the granddaughter was there, and there were at least 50 people in attendance completely enjoying this presentation and learning about Crown Farm. So there's a lot of people interested in the Crown Farm itself and the history and the historic part of it, and I would hate to see that disrupted because it was a very enjoyable afternoon, and so that's coming from a different perspective, but it was a very pleasant thing, and to hear the family talk about it and talk about the home and the things they did, it just meant a lot to a lot of the people there.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else from the public? Okay, very good. Welcome. Please state your name and your district.
Hello, my name is Jocelyn Schaefer. I live at 477 Salk Circle, not directly behind the farmhouse, but just one house over. And I just want to make one little addition in that I understand that that any modifications to the historic property should be congruent with the neighborhood. And there are no privacy fences in Crown. Crown is very open. As Eileen and Oscar Pineda could tell you, the back of their house abuts parkland. There are no fences. There just aren't privacy fences anywhere within the neighborhood. And to have this here would not only be a shame for people visiting the parkland, but it just wouldn't fit with the community in which the farmhouse is located. Like Susie, when we, and Joe and Linda who spoke, when we bought the house, we thought it was so charming to live behind the farm buildings. I grew up in a very rural area with a lot of farms, and I had very good friends who had dairy farms, and it was really charming to me that I could kind of return to a sense of being near a farm. And having the privacy fence extend, not only having a privacy fence near the house, but having it extend so far behind the house to the extent that it would really interfere with some of the neighbors' enjoyment of their own property is just very, very sad. And we would hope that they would rethink the placement of the fence as well as the type of fence that they would like to install on their property. We were not at all surprised when the split rail fence was put in, because we could understand that the owners of the house wouldn't want visitors to the farm property intruding on their private space. So as Linda said, we didn't have any objection to that as neighbors. But this is very, very different. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, welcome. Please state your name. And your
Eileen
district.
Panetta, 444 Sauk Circle. I just want to say we were one of the first owners in that area, and we lived right next door to a model home, and we had numerous people coming up to our house, peeking in our window, and we lived there. We had not just bought it, we lived there, and people would come and look in our window and stuff like that. So got to the point where we had to put up a sign, but people were curious. They wanted to see. This is a beautiful structure that they renovated. People are curious. They probably did not know that you're moved in yet. But going back to the privacy fence, we do have a dog park behind us, and there is not one fence. There are no high trees. There is nothing in any of the houses that butt up to the back of that park, and it's all open. And we have never had issues. We put drapes in our house and stuff like that if we wanted our privacy, but it's wide open. Every single house, I was looking there the other day, every single house is wide open. And we don't even have, I was thinking, well, maybe people would put up big trees, to separate their house. Not one house has any sort of privacy fence, trees, nothing. It's wide open, and that's the way the community is. And, we hope that they keep the integrity of the entire community. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, welcome. Please
My
state
name's
your
Ray
name.
Lynn. I live at 481 Salk Circle. I just want to make a quick statement that 65 people signed a petition against this fence being built. So I don't know if you guys got copies of that, but
We did.
so that's a fair amount of people, but that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anyone else? Feel free. Maybe not. He left.
Please,
Okay.
audience,
I'm sorry?
the Zoom audience.
Yeah, next, yes. So anyone else? Last chance? No? Okay, very good. Yes, thank you very much. All right, next then is tech team. Please play the video.
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop and you wish to make a public comment, we can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raise hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
Okay, we have a number of people in the attendee role, but I don't see anyone with their hand raised yet. We'll give them a moment.
Thank you.
Still nothing.
I would recommend you could probably continue with the meeting, and if someone's hand does raise, I think Chris could probably let you know.
Okay,
Thanks,
that
Rick.
sounds fine. All right, so then next is the commission. All right, actually, before we go there, Mr. City Attorney, would you like to offer any thoughts for legal guidance to the commission as to what we should do, what we should consider, and what we should avoid?
Of course, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. I will give a synopsis of the state and local laws that are relevant to this hearing, given all the arguments that have been presented. I'm going to start from the very beginning, just to make sure that everyone understands where the powers of the HDC, the Historic District Commission, are derived, and what the criteria is, standards that we are governed by here tonight. Under the Maryland Land Use Article, Section 8201, a local jurisdiction, in this case the City of Gaithersburg, may create a Historic District Commission, or HDC. Section 8104 of the Land Use Article states that that legislative body may, by local law, regulate the construction, and I'm reading directly from the state law, the construction, reconstruction, alteration, moving, and demolition of sites or structures of historical, archaeological, or architectural significance. 8105 states that the HDC may designate boundaries for sites, structures, and districts that are considered to be of historic, archaeological, or architectural significance. Now, moving on to the city code. The section of the city code that we are governed by here tonight deals with 5 different criteria for historic area work permits that the HDC must follow and consider before rendering its decision on any application. First is the preservation of historic, archaeological, or architectural significance of the site or structure and its relationship to the historic, archaeological, or architectural significance of the surrounding area. Second is a review and analysis of how the structure fits and abides by the guidelines for rehabilitation. In this case, it is the Russell and Walker historic guidelines. Third is the relationship of the exterior architectural features of the structure to the remainder of the structure and surrounding area. Fourth, the general compatibility of the exterior design, scale, proportion, arrangement, texture, and materials proposed to be used. And then finally, any other factors, including aesthetic factors. Importantly, I want to go over the guidelines, which is criteria number 2. The guidelines are a set of rules or general set of explanations and principles to be used by the HDC as an aid in determining the correct course of action or decision for any work permit that comes before it. It is just one factor that it is to review based on section 24227.2A, which lists the criteria that I just went over. Effective implementation of the guidelines, which was a cite made by the applicant within the guidelines, does not imply a blind, rigid adherence to them. This interpretation is supported by the fact that a review of the guidelines is just one of the 5 different factors the commission must take into account when making a decision. They may very well be instances where a proposed project meets every relevant guideline specification verbatim, but at the same time fail to meet the other factors listed under 24-227.2. To go over just briefly, also, there was an issue raised of whether or not, due to the parceling out of the historic property, whether it fits within the HDC's jurisdiction. And based on the resolution number HDC-1-08, it was very clear that, and I'm quoting from the resolution, the historic site shall be established to include the private property as well as the city park. The following structures shall be included in the historic designation, which includes the England Crown Manor House. And that would be exhibit, that was found in Exhibit 6 of the record.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, all right. Next then.
If I can interject
yes,
real quick, it may be prudent to see if the applicant would like to respond to any of the comments maybe raised from the
Wonderful.
public.
Well, thank you very
before we get
much.
in deliberation with the commission.
Well, yes, absolutely. Please do.
So there are several. There's a lot of comments. First, I want to make a clarification point. I don't think that there was ever a question on whether or not our property was historic, as just stated. That was never in question. Just for clarification purposes. A few things that we want to go over. One, we are horribly sorry about the size of parcels and the location of property lines. However, the size of parcels and location of property lines is not our fault. We were not the ones that drew up the parcels that were split up and subdivided in the development, and therefore the location of the fence in regards to their house is just by Maryland state law where we're allowed to put the fence, and we shouldn't have to, and if we did.
I just want to interject quickly, and then I will let him continue. There's a history too as well in law that if you don't fence to your property line or slightly within to make sure you're there, you can over time actually lose land. I'd just like to point that out, and I'm sure Mr. Perla could speak to that as well as it is well known.
I would need you to cite to that.
You want me to? Okay, well, I don't have the site off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
That is, yeah, okay.
I could get it for you later if helpful.
She's referencing adverse possession laws.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's a 20-year time limit. That is, if you do not claim your property over a 20-year period, you can lose it. It's not a guarantee that you will, but I understand that you have to.
But it has nothing to do with where the fence is. It has to do with what you do with the property. Their mowing the grass would be sufficient to eliminate any adverse possession claim of anybody.
That's true. That's true. That's true. You just have to keep maintenance or keep claiming it. That's all. But continue. That's not a big issue.
The point is still that we are not responsible for the property lines or the parcels that were designated by a developer. So the location of our property line as opposed to the location of somebody else's, I mean, it's still our property, and we do have certain rules. So to one point that I want to bring up, topography is a really big thing. As a geographer, I'm very keen on topography and the locations of things. As you drive down the road, we made it very clear to try to push that to have it be a picket fence. So the sight lines from the home are not obstructed. Everybody can see the beautiful side of the home, the front of the home. The other part I want to bring up is, many times we were talking about the placement. The placement of the fence actually at the bottom of the steep hill is actually to the benefit of the neighbors. Their houses are slightly raised, and if you actually do measure 6 feet up from the ground, the top of the fence is approximately to the railing on their fence, railing on their decks. So their views are really not obstructed, actually, of the backyard in the historic house. So that's something to make very clear, is that there's not really a heavy obstruction of view because the fence is actually lower than their property.
Can you say that again?
So
the top of the fence.
So their homes, their decks are raised. They're not on the ground. They're steps down. The fence is actually on the ground. So when you put the fence height coming up, so you have your deck, the fence comes up to the deck, and now it's going to come up to about the railing on their fence.
That top railing.
That top railing, right? Because people have railings that I can't remember the exact height, but their code says they have to be at, but it's about at that height.
I got it.
So if you're sitting, theoretically, you can still see well over the fence. Now, if we put the fence at the top of that hill, where the split rail, and I want to remind you all, split rail is prohibited. It says that split rails are not allowed in the guidance. If we were to put it there, it would actually obstruct a lot more view, because now they wouldn't be able to see over it. They would have an obstructed view of the old log house, which under the current fencing, they would have a perfect view of. So I just want to make that very clear. The other thing that I wanted to kind of bring up is we've talked a lot about the historic properties were once one and they split them. I think it's important to bring up the fact that we said it in our talks, there was never an easement, and there is in Montgomery County a historic easement program. That historic easement actually grants people, depending on how you word it, can actually allow access for people to the outside of homes, the inside of homes, and the property and the environment around the homes. It's very important to think that the city owned this property. This property was split. At the time of that split, if they thought it was important for people to be able to walk and enjoy the environment of that specific private residence, why was an easement not put in place? Why did they not take what they had liberty to do, put a historic easement on the back portion of that property or on the whole property to ensure that people could walk and enjoy the whole farmstead? They did not do that, and that was at the full discretion of the city at the time to make that decision.
I thank you. Now I have a few points, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm glad that everyone is convinced that it's a safe neighborhood. That's great. There was a murder 2 blocks from the house, like on Monday, so things do happen everywhere. In the parking lot of Crown, which is very, very close to the Crown farmhouse. Okay, and sorry. I'd also, again, just like to clarify, I don't think this actually matters. That house wasn't flipped. The person stated she intended to live there. She had personal reasons that then made it so that she didn't. Also, the note about the property or the fence and the historical photo, at that time, the property lines were drastically different. I mean, the Crown farm owner owned all of your houses to it, or sorry, not yours, all of the Crown development. So, yes. And finally, I would like to bring up one other thing about views. We did consult a constitutional law scholar who has been an appellate litigator for over 30 years, and in thinking about sightline issues, it's really important to differentiate the issues that are perhaps being muddled together. So I'd like to clarify that for the comment about the private sightlines. So sightlines towards the park, which the neighbors are concerned about and just expressed, actually aren't, they have nothing to do with historic preservation law, and it essentially amounts to the neighbors trying to use the historic preservation law to impose on our property rights and privacy. It should be rejected by the board as an improper use of the historic preservation law and as arguably legally challengeable act, both because it is beyond the scope of the historic preservation law and indeed contrary to the express guidelines for implementing the historic preservation law, and because it could be said to amount to a legally imposed easement on your property for which the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution arguably requires the government to compensate us for.
And again, that is just for the sightlines from private property.
Private property is not guaranteed sightlines, or there's a old legal saying, you're not entitled to air or even light. It can all change. You're not entitled to it from your property. But again, I would like to stress the fact that where the fence is actually does not impair their sightlines at all.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to. I would like to point that out.
I think that that's the last important note, is that we have tried, again, with the placement of the picket fence in the front of the property, to make it feel warm, right? When you drive down Steinbeck Ave, you will see a white picket fence around an old farmhouse sitting on the top of the hill, or top of a raised knoll, if you will. To me, that is very inviting. That doesn't scream walled off. You're correct. If you're in the park and you look, you'll see a little bit of a picket fence, and you'll see a white privacy fence, and then you'll see the Crown Farm rising up above it. Again, will that feel a little, you can make any argument what you want, but you still see a majority of the farmhouse from that point, and it is ensures the privacy of the residents there so we can live our lives and not feel like we're being watched at every moment and every turn. We have done everything we can to ensure that the fence that we've picked, that the location of the fence will protect our rights as the landowner, but also guarantee that the people visiting the park won't feel like it's this out of place thing, that they'll be able to still see the farm. As you drive around the road, you'll still be able to see the farmhouse. Again, the last thing to mention, the guidelines are actually, the guidelines allow, and granted, there's other considerations, but they do allow for the fence to be in other locations, right? To come much further up on the property. We don't want that because that would obscure the view of the home from Steinbeck Ave. We don't want to do that. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to make sure that everybody can enjoy it. And to the point about people coming and going from the wall, the porch and looking in, yes, there is something to say about, that happens, but the fact is that no one knocked on our door. We've been moving things in and out of that house. We've been in that house when that happens. We've seen people in the backyard of that house. The house went for sale. The house went on the market. The house went contingent. The house sold. Then they removed the for sale sign in front of the house. And all of these photos all of these videos take place after that has happened. So for anybody who lives in the neighborhood, it's perfectly clear that that home is now owned by somebody. We had, granted, not a lot of furniture because everything's on back order, had a chair that we actually purposely put the chair in the front window so people would see that there is furniture in the house, that there are people there. It didn't stop people from coming and peeking and looking in. And that is the blessing and the curse of owning a historic home, is that people are very much inquisitive. They want to see. In fact, we've actually had people come while we were there, and I showed them happily around the property. And we want to continue to do that. What we don't want is people invading our privacy on a regular basis, whether that's poking their heads through a fence, or whether that's walking onto our porch, bypassing our front door, and pressing their bodies against our windows.
And to the point of other individuals have experienced, I guess, similar things in the new construction and put up a private residence sign. I also believe we are governed on what signs we can put up, so we're not entitled to those kind of privileges.
It does
we're
say,
trying to work within the guidelines of the historic committee. We can't do all of those things.
And I think the last thing that's pertinent to note is, and this is maybe less of a factual, more of a quib, we have seen people, we were advised, well, if you see people, you should call the police. We actually have called the police. And the funny thing is when we were on the phone with them, the one thing they told us was, you should put up a privacy fence. I found that really humorous because we're in the middle of this. But again, take it for what it is. It is comical to us, and I had to actually apologize to the person I was on the phone because I chuckled to myself because we're going through this for that reason. Again, that's all I can say.
Okay. I am. Hold on a sec. So you're all complete now with your presentation?
Unless you have questions for us?
We will. Okay. All right. Because they had a rebuttal, I'm opening it up to anyone who wants to have a rebuttal. Please come to the podium. Please state your name and your district. You have 3 minutes again.
Hopefully it won't take 3 minutes. Martin Schaefer, 477 Salk Circle. The only response I wanted to make was to the sightlines. We're making a big issue of sightlines and constitutional issues. The issue isn't sightlines. The issue is, does the privacy fence around the large part of this property interfere with the historic nature or character of the property? The historic parcel is the entire property, not the privately owned property or the publicly owned property. It's the entire property as a whole. And what does that fence do to the property as a whole? I mean, sight lines are issues, and what you can see and not see, and separating the street view from the back view, to my mind, is totally inappropriate when the backing of this house is a public park, or at least intended to be a public park, but even now is used as a public park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, anyone else, feel free to come up. Stick to the rebuttal issues, please.
444 Salt Circle, Oscar Pineda. I think we're getting a little bit confused here. We are not in any way disputing a fence. We are disputing the type of fence that is being proposed. Now, on the issue of privacy, if you take a couple of drives around our neighborhood, you will probably get to know every one of us from your car and us being inside the house. So what is privacy exactly? Is it a demarcation of the property so people would know, it's somebody's house, there's a fence there? Or is it a solid fence? So, as I said, we have no issue at all with the fence. It is the type of fence. Everybody has made it abundantly clear the neighborhood is open. None of us have anything. So it's wide open. Security is not an issue. Things can happen anywhere, but we live in a really nice neighborhood with no issues at all. I've come home at 2 o'clock in the morning. There are people walking their dogs. There's a dog park in the back. I travel quite a bit. My wife spends quite a bit of time by herself. Never had any issues. So, as I said, it's not the fence. It's the type of fence. And the issue of people coming up to the door, it happened to us almost 2 years after we have moved in, right? All of us. People saw that they were being built and their house was being renovated. Of course people are curious. They're going to walk right up and see what's going on. We found a lot of greasy marks on the windows quite often. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for rebuttal?
Mr. Chair, we do have two people. Oh, no, go ahead. I'll note that when he's finished, we do have two people via Zoom.
Okay. Please state your name and your district
Yeah,
again, please.
Joseph Son, 485 Stark Circle. I know Amos mentioned that the height of the 6-foot fence will be at the level with the fence or rail on my deck. However, the 6-foot fence are based on the plan is supposed to start at the front of the garage, which is like in the like near my kitchen area. So when I look at throughout the window right there, we'll see a 6-foot fence in front of my house. And then I don't know if you guys can see page 12 of the packet that was posted in the. So if you look at it closely, the fence line, and then yes, very similar picture to that. So the house that you can see in that picture on the right side, that's my house right next to it. Yeah, this isn't the picture, but there was a page 12. Yeah, it's very similar to it, but
Tech team, if you can pull up my computer.
Yeah, that is it. So if you look at the picture right there.
If you're standing in the front yard, is your house to the right or to the left?
That's one on the right. Yeah, that's my house.
That's
and,
what I
that's
thought.
the back of the. Yeah, that is the back side of the house. And if you see, and also there's a stairway, down to the basement right there, and literally it's just 2-3 steps away from my house, and then. Of course, we probably be able to see above that, the fence, but literally sitting out, that little space that literally I enjoy after work, like during the springtime, I just sit out there, read books and stuff. But looking at the fence right there, literally, they made it sound like it's not a big deal, we'll be able to see. But if it was your house, you will understand, literally sitting right next to that fence, even if it's doesn't come up above the rail, the deck, so still is very claustrophobic in that area. And that's for me, but Ray and Linda, they didn't speak much, but their house, if the fence, 6-foot fence goes on that elevation or the slope, literally it's gonna be a big wall. It can be 10 foot, 15 foot to them, from their deck. And I don't know, what they're gonna see is just a wall, seriously, because their houses sit on the higher elevation, so that's what's going to happen. So I just want to mention that it's not just, it's going to be flush with the rail, of the deck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. Please again state your name and your district.
Linda Lynn, 481 Sauk Circle. So I am Joseph and Sophia's neighbor with my husband, and that's true. I believe that right on the garage line is where it's supposed to transition from or proposed to transition from a 3-foot to a 6-foot, so that would be all completely behind the house, a 6-foot fence. Please consider some alternative. The other thing is that because their land is higher and ours is lower, I'm not really sure what the benefit would be to having a hill and then your fence. Like if you have animals, are they going to roll down the hill and then run into the fence? I'm not really sure, but I know that if it's your property, so that they don't have to answer to me, but thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Okay, any other rebuttal? Anyone wants to offer a rebuttal to what the applicants have said on their rebuttal? No? Okay, very good. And so can we go to the applicants on Zoom? I mean, the public on Zoom?
Yeah, tech team, if you can go to our first speaker, Mr. Richard Burka, I believe.
Hey, yes, my name is Richard Burka. I live at 308 Hemingway Drive. I am perpendicular to the farmhouse. And, you know, Crown Farm is I guess it's a planned unit development. It was wide open. You know, everybody here has maintained that wide open. There are no fences other than the ornamental decorative fences, you know, that are along the front of some of the houses. And it's going to change the entire integrity of the neighborhood, not to mention the historic views of the farmhouse. And there have to be some other options besides this. And, you know, I hope you take that into your consideration. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And next we have a Mr. Mark Wexler.
Welcome. Please state your district, please.
Hi, my name is Mark Wexler. I'm from 417 Salk Circle. And just a note that we appreciate that this is an issue that has two sides, but we'd like to say that, you know, one of the things here that we see is that, you know, the promise of Crown is one that was, you know, advertised by the officials of Gaithersburg, you know, to maintain the aesthetics of the environment and of the community. And, you know, while we see that, you know, maybe there is some need for some fencing to avoid people getting in, that can be accomplished, getting to their property. It could probably be accomplished in a number of different ways. And, you know, we'd like, you know, the people in this community that bought into it after the annexation of Crown to Gaithersburg and went through multi-phase, multi-layered approval processes to get everything in Crown the way it is, would hope that, you know, being left to the mercy of the decision of this council would take into consideration how a 6-foot privacy fence might impact those aesthetics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else, Chris?
I see no one else.
Okay, all right. All right, so public comments now are closed. So let's hear from the commission. All right, Commissioner Roddy, you're up first.
All right, let me tell you where I'm coming from. And what I'm going to say is based on not only my experience with the HDC for a number of years and living in Gaithersburg for a number of years, but I am familiar with Crown itself. And at one time I was the District of Columbia's attorney that did their litigation for all zoning matters, albeit a long time ago. I think one of the Harrisons were president at the time, but I forget. But I see merit to both sides. I'm glad to see that they're still civil, that this isn't really an antagonistic situation. But you're asking for a decision and you're going to have to put up with what you get. I bring with me from the district and my experience down there one overarching precept, and that is where there's ambiguity in a situation, look at the context, the context, the context. And in this case, the focus of the context is at one time this was one parcel, and that parcel in its entirety was declared historic. After that, it became split. And we have a number of things to look at to see how we handle the issue that's before us today. And I want to focus on just the issue. And when I say the issue, we haven't talked about the front fence at all tonight. I want to focus on the back fence, specifically on the board-abutting-board fence that allows no light between the boards, no vision. We're told to look at 24.2272A1, the preservation of the site, the historic significance of it, and its relationship to the significant surrounding area. 3, the relationship of the architectural features of the structure to the remainder of the structure and the surrounding area. Going down to B, the commission is to be lenient in its judgment of plans, but once again, it is unless the plans are seriously impairing the historical nature or the architecture significance of the surrounding resources. Again, this was one parcel at the time it was designated as historic. I think myself that the board-abutting-board for the entire backyard would cleave the farmstead and split the house from the traditional outbuildings. It would no longer be of the farm context that we're looking at. It would totally sever the relationship of the two parcels. I would like to think that there's an alternative that we could consider. Staff had initially proposed a partial board-abutting-board right next to the deck. Is it possible we can consider a board-abutting-board baffle somewhere in the middle between the deck and the property line back there? Please consider that. I'll terminate at this point.
Thank you very much. Okay, Commissioner LaFrance, you're next.
Well, again, about the relationship with the surrounding areas. And also, even though the neighborhood is of new construction, there is a feel for openness throughout the entire neighborhood, and also the importance of the historic resource and the surrounding area of other historic resources. May I have some clarification, Chris Berger, on a sign placement? Why the current owners of the house feel they would not be able to place a private property sign?
Yeah, I haven't looked into that yet. It depends on the sign, of course. We would review anything they wanted to place. I don't know if Greg has anything to add to that.
No, I think we would review it probably as a historic area work permit similar to the fence that's before you tonight.
Okay.
But ultimately, it would come down to the commission's consideration on the placement and location and approval of that.
And you should know, as homeowners, you also could, if you wanted to, order a historic plaque for the property. That might also help. And let's see, as far as where the fence goes, I think that the owners are within their full rights for the placement of said fence. But I also do not agree it's appropriate for a board-abutting-board fence. It would feel like, I think it was mentioned earlier, like a compound or fortress. And it seems very inappropriate to me based on the evidence. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Feinstein.
Hi, good evening. I want to start with just real briefly on actually, because we haven't addressed it yet, the front yard fence. And my understanding of the guidelines, and maybe I'm missing something, reading the Brooks Russell Walker guidelines on fences and hedges, that states that fences or hedge placement begins at the front or rear corner of the house and extends to the rear. Fences in the front yards are only allowed on the Brooks and Walker Avenues themselves and only when historical evidence shows prior placement. So from my understanding, before we even get to the rear fence, I don't even know if the front fence complies.
Yes, Greg and I had this discussion. Greg, do you want to start?
Yeah, again, I would remind the commission that, again, as Assistant City Attorney Perla mentioned, right, again, the guidelines are just one factor of the decision by the commission tonight. So you can deviate from those guidelines if you do feel that it's necessary or that it's historically significant or correct, right, to do so. Which guideline, though, are you referencing, if you don't mind? I have it in front of me.
I'm talking specifically about the placement of the fences in the front yard. I believe it's on page 28 of the guidelines, right beneath the
Yeah,
diagram.
you're talking about where it shows the little graphic as well that's included?
And right behind that, right below that diagram, it's talking specifically about.
So if you go back a couple bullets, right, it does outline within the guidelines that a fence is permitted within the front yard with a wooded picket or wrought iron or of simple design.
Well,
The graphic itself.
That's 26. That's page 26. Does it say that, what I apologize for interrupting.
Sure.
Forgive me. What I'm hearing is, what I know is on page 26 of the guidelines, it does say fences should be simple wooden pickets or wrought iron of simple design if visible from the street. But are you saying on 28 it says it? Because then there's a conflict from what I understood.
Yeah, because my understanding of 26 is that if it's visible from the
Right.
front, it should be a 3-foot fence there, or it should be the wrought iron or picket fence when it's visible. But when it's in the front yard, my understanding is it's only allowed when there's evidence of it previously been there.
When we review fences, and again, not necessarily a historic preservation perspective, but just in general, right, we draw a line imaginarily from the front of the building. Everything beyond the back of that is considered backyard, even along parallel or perpendicular to the building itself.
Yeah.
So everything in front of that building, frontage would be considered front yard.
Right, and that's what I'm talking about.
But sometimes there's an exception if it's a corner lot. Like was mentioned earlier, if there's a road on a couple of sides of that.
Right, that doesn't.
And then the other thing I want to mention, because I forgot to earlier, I live in the Chestnut Meme Historic District, and no front fences are allowed in the district I live in.
So those are different design guidelines than the ones
Yes.
that are applicable to this application
Yes.
tonight. I would note as well that there is some precedence within the Brooks Russell Walker Avenue neighborhoods of some front yard fences. So again, it's up to the commission's decision on this application, but there have been other ones approved in the front yard. I would note the guidelines to say they're not, that it's not preferred, I would say, to have a front yard fence, but it's not something the commission could not approve.
Yeah, I was just I understand that's just one factor. I was just trying to get clarity on the guidelines with regard to the front fence.
I'm confused, to be honest with you, then.
My understanding is not.
What's not?
It's not considered
Allowed.
appropriate in the guidelines.
It's not allowed in the.
That's my understanding.
That's what I'm hearing from you, so this is why I was asking you, Greg, for clarification. Did your clarification that you mentioned, did that come on your page 28, or did you refer to page 26 when you were saying the fences should be simple wooden pickets or wrought iron fence? Forget that question. My question is are we, I know we're allowed to deviate from the guidelines. We are legally allowed to do that. My question is, does the guidelines say that the fences in the Brooks Russell Walker in the front of the property are not allowed? That's what I'm.
There's a way to read this in two ways. The text itself it says on Brooks and Walker Avenues, a fence or hedge that encloses the front yard will be approved only with historical documentation showing a prior placement in the requested location. This could be either two things. It could mean that it's allowed potentially in the other aspects of the Brooks Russell Walker district, and just on those two roads, it's specific to that when it's existing prior, or it could mean that it's only allowed in those specific instances. And I'm not sure what the actual intent of the guidelines is.
My interpretation of the guidelines is that, again, they're talking specifically about Brooks and Walker Avenue, so as an individually designated site, that wouldn't necessarily apply. And then we would revert to what is on page 26, which allows
Okay.
Fences in the front
That
yard, which
clears it
either
up for me.
picket or wrought iron fences.
Where does it say the front yard? Maybe I missed that.
On 26?
I don't know if Tech Team can pull up my computer, page 26, which I have on my screen right now.
It actually says the term "visible from the street." That's how it refers to it.
Yeah.
So again, going by past precedent, like I've said, the commission has approved similar requests in the past for front yards, specifically picket fences of 3 feet in height. I think the commission has essentially interpreted that section of the guidelines as being front yard as well as visible.
Sure.
But again, every application is reviewed on its own merit, obviously, as you're all aware.
And
So-
this particular application is making me read these guidelines multiple times. So,
yeah, you can speak.
From what I heard you say, I think they're only allowed, you're saying the portion you're reading, they're only allowed if they were previously there.
yeah, and that, it's showing historic evidence in those specific locations.
Just on those two roads, so it doesn't apply to you.
Well, I don't know if it does or not. I don't.
Okay, I mean,
Well, I
well,
thought that's what
regardless,
Chris
there is
just-
historical evidence.
You're not sure, because Chris just relayed to me what I'm sorry, what Chris just relayed, as I understand it, is that it really only applies to those two particular roads. Do you have other thoughts in conflict with that conclusion?
I mean, it does say over time, a few hedges and fences were added to front yards before the establishment of guidelines for this district. However, these are exceptions, and the overall absence of front yard containment continues the historic openness of the streetscape.
Yeah, they want it open. It's in here on page 25 that the Brooks Russell Walker wants to be, it is currently open, and they want to maintain that. I get that. But what I'm wondering is what Chris said, that it only applies to those two roads as far as not allowing the fence. Is he correct, or do you still think that that may not be correct?
I mean, I think his interpretation could very well be correct.
Okay.
I don't know. That was a question.
And I would note there's obviously historical evidence, as you saw in the photos, that there was a front fence of probably about 3 feet in height that was a picket or simple design.
Okay, moving on. Regarding the rear fence, my issues are the following. I think there's a conflict in the language of the guidelines in the sense that the guidelines reference, and it not specifically, but to the diagrams, but they reference that fences should be light and transparent. But then they allow for the board-abutting-board fence, which is neither. So it's left to the commission to determine the appropriateness of the fence in the given
Can I
location.
interject on your concept? On page 26, the way I read it, what you just said is correct, that light and transparent fences bound in side yards, but what they're also saying is that it's the openness of the front streetscape. They're not addressing, and from what I gather here, on the openness for the backyard fence. Now, I personally, and I guess I need to jump ahead, I personally think when I'm reading through this, that there are 4 property lines that are defined in these, in the design guidelines, and that's what I'm going to discuss when it comes to me. But it's just mostly on the front and the side that they're really saying that it's currently open and they want it to be light and transparent on the bounded side yards.
And that's primarily because the Brooks Russell Walker district are houses that abut back to one another, and they're long, deep lots. So having a fence in the rear that's 6 foot high, you can't even see it from the street. It's not even an issue. So we're dealing with something that's, it's a little bit different situation.
It's very out in the open, this particular property. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why I'm saying it's the guidelines, while they're slightly ambiguous, still because of the uniqueness of this, and it's an outlier. It's not located in the Brooks Russell Walker district, even though we follow those guidelines to for our input here. It makes it more challenging. So the site, like we were talking about, the site itself is historically designated, not the house, not the outbuildings. They're referred to as being, included in the designation. But when I read the text of the designation, it talks specifically about the site. And it also talks that the site is subdivided between a private property and a city park, which is, it's written in the declaration of the historic declaration. So it's not like it wasn't known, and it was still important when it was historically designated that they were, it read as one site as a whole. I read the emails, reports, correspondences, and I was struck by the historic photo that's been referenced a few times on, I guess it's Exhibit 13. And it was referenced, I think, by multiple people. One in the emails, and I know from the homeowners, they referenced it as evidence that, there is an appropriateness of fence around the building. But there is, when you look at that fence, it's light and transparent.
Yeah.
So it's
right.
There again lies that conflict of appropriateness. I think a critical component is understanding how a fence like this will impact a site as a whole. It's stated in the report due to topography, it shouldn't be that visible, especially along the northwest, which I think is you're exactly right. As you're driving down Steinbeck from the north, you're not going to see the fence. It will be hidden behind the houses that weren't there when they're not exactly historically appropriate either. But the concern I have is more as it places against the park on the other side of the lot, on the south and the west. That character will be altered as you're sitting in the park, and or whatever that park is going to be utilized for. Now, the alternative is, however, the creation of the city park there. If it is a dog park or a playground or something like that, that'll change the historic nature of that site equally. I don't know how that park is scheduled to be planned out, if it has been planned. That was a question I had for...
It has not been yet. The city is still exploring how we're going to activate the park. It will be activated in some way. How that ultimately will be done, we're not sure yet. I would gather the minimum, there's probably going to be some type of playground equipment there, but again, that is still obviously all subject to change. Again, we have not determined yet how to activate it.
So yeah, as we're considering this, we're considering a fence, but we're looking at potentially a piece of playground on that site also, which will change the view of that landscape, change the view of the site. Kind of reminds me of years ago, and not to say it's precedent, but we approved a property where there was an issue with preserving a structure or demolishing it because of parking, and we came to what we thought was a compromise, and later on they pretty much kept the structure, but everything around the structure became a parking lot, and that, while we preserved the historic structure, it changed the entire feel of that structure itself, and that's obviously not what we want to do here. So I've gone on, raised a bunch of issues. I haven't really, I'm having a struggle coming to a conclusion because I see relevance in all these different points regarding and I'm looking specifically, I appreciate the neighbors who are here, who have come and spoken, but I'm looking specifically at my purview as a historic district commissioner. It relates specifically to the historic site itself and how this fence relates to that. So that's where I'm trying to kind of weigh the pros and the cons. I wish there was a compromise, some sort of something that would allow for more transparency or more lightness, but I understand why you don't want that. So that's where I am right now with this.
Thank you very much. Okay, Commissioner Morgan.
That's a whole lot. I want to focus on 3 areas. The context of your application, the context of the opposition, and the context of the guideline. So we have 3 things here I want to focus on. Again, I don't have a solution for you. I appreciate your interest in the property, your love for the property. Also, from the testimony, you have good neighbors. I would say that. Okay. I have one question for you. You keep talking about people coming up to the front and peeping in your window, but you won't put a fence in the back. Are people crossing your yard from the back, coming into the front?
So when we've been working, we have seen people crossing in the back as well. We don't have a camera there. We
Okay. all
trying
right.
to get everything going. So
Okay.
we have seen people all around the property.
All right. So if I focus on your context of your application, you said a couple of things. You talk about security. You talk about pets. You have pets? You have a lot of pets?
We do have pets.
Okay. You have kids?
Not yet.
Okay.
I do have 2 very small nephews, though,
Okay,
that come and they live close by, and they come over frequently, and
All right. Okay.
they are of great concern to me.
Okay. So the application, you want privacy, basically, from your experience and the things that have been happening around your house. And that's why you're applying to have a 6-foot fence, a privacy fence. Okay. And basically, I understand the neighbors, and based on the guideline, I'm looking at the guideline. And the thing is, as historical district commissioner, we have to go by the guideline. I can only look at the guideline to make that decision. Basically, your need for security, your need for your kids, your need for pets. I still have to make that, because this is clearly annotated in the guideline, that what we need to do and what you need to do. So did you have access to the guideline before you file your application for the fence?
So we actually asked for these guidelines before we even purchased the home.
Okay.
In order to read over them. And that is why, as the guidelines said, and we've talked about previously, the board-abutting-board is an option within the guidelines.
Yes.
And Sarah can speak to this more, but there's been lots of discussion about gray areas and guidelines, much like the gate was.
Yeah.
The gates are not mentioned. There's discretion in that. Where we tried to do is follow the things that are explicitly allowed within the guidelines. And so we wanted to stay within that and not look for any gray area. In fact, in many cases, like the color, right, the guidelines state that it has to be stained or painted. So there's no requirement for us to paint it white, but we want to paint it white because that helps it blend into the neighborhood.
Okay.
So we did look at the guidelines, we went over them, and we picked things that were explicitly said that where they were allowed to do.
Okay, talking about gray area, we do have a gray. That's why we're sitting here. We do have a gray, and we need to marginalize or erase that gray area. That's okay. So basically, you mentioned about the property being historical. You acknowledged that, and the 2 property was subdivided in 2011. This is the guideline, but they are basically the style would be 1. So this is where we are. My suggestion to you, I think we need to look at options and looking at it. There's a need for compromise. The guideline talked about visual, and you have board on board. Basically, that's what it is. It's a wall. Okay, you actually, you put in a wall. It may be a fence, but you have a 6 feet high fence, and driving from the street based on the slope of the land, it won't have an impact on it. But if I'm sitting on my deck as your neighbor, and I'm sitting, having gas, or sitting there in the evening and looking on a hill. When I look on the hill, I see a fortress. It's a wall, basically. It's a wall. But if we can compromise and come up with some alternative that can minimize what you're trying to impact that this will have on the surrounding area, including your neighbors. And I think that's where we want to go with this. And again, right now, off the bat, I don't have anything right now, but I can suggest to you. The other thing about pets, there's so many different alternatives that you can use electronically to address the issue. So there's all the things that you did mention in your presentation. We can all work together, and I think I would suggest that your neighbors are good. They're looking out for you. Basically, this opposition doesn't mean that somebody don't want you to have something. It just is a way of compromising and working together. So I think we should be open to alternative, and that's why I agree with the staff recommendation to look at alternative. That's why would be my approach.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Next and last, you guys probably already heard some of my thoughts coming. I understand that we were required to use many different elements to make our decision. We have the list of 5. It appears to me that most of these items, 1 through 5, apply to maintaining the original architectural significance of the Crown Farm. Based on those 5 solely, I am of the mindset that there should be no fences. But I also understand that there is a need for a person to use their own home for many of the ways that they prefer. So I personally believe that you should be allowed to have a fence on all 4 of your sides, 4 sides of your property, if the city guidelines allow it, which I understand they do. So I'm not here to oppose a fence at all. What I am trying to say is that when I'm reading through all these things, it appears to me that we should, as a commission, not allow a big giant wall on 3 of the 4 sides. And so I'll just refer to the element. And again, we don't have to adhere to every single one or any of them, but as a general whole, the authors of the guidelines way back in 2004 apparently had this concept that everything is open in the district. So I'm just going to hit the 3 pages that the parts of them that were significant to me. On page 25, it says the Walker streetscapes differ slightly, but for the most part, they combine public and private space. This is something back in 2004 that they recognized, and I believe it's still appropriate today. There are a few fences or hedges that serve as barriers between public spaces, streets and sidewalks, and the front yards. Going down to page 26, it states, historic photos of the district show an openness to the streetscape, not rigid structure or containment. Light and transparent fences bounded side yards and confined animals. Further, it goes on to say, and these are things that the commission brought up already, the light and transparency, but then next they also reference the fence style should be appropriate for the architectural style and scale of the house. Fences should be simple wooden pickets or wrought iron of simple design if visible from the street. To me, that's not just the front, that's the front and the sides. And then it says, or for rear yards only. And I personally believe, and I'll get to it in a second, I'll show you why I think that. I believe you have 4 areas of your property. You have 4 lines, the front, the sides, and the rear. I personally do not consider, when I'm reading through these guidelines, that anything beyond the front of the house is rear. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that that's what the guidelines say to me. If I just read the words themselves, they do not say that at all. Whether or not they apply it or applied it in the past, I'm not sure. I don't even recall myself hearing that before. But my point is, according to these guidelines, you have 4 separate designations on your property, as everyone else does. So then it says, for the rear yards only, post and wire, board-abutting-board, open 3-rail fence, or open board-on-board, for rear yards only, and I consider that just for your rear yard. In your particular case, you kind of have 2 front yards. The front and the rear are open to the public right-of-way. I personally, on my own house, have 2 front yards, the front and the side, which, by the way, is not a great thing. I wish I never had that. You pay double what everybody else pays. But nevertheless, it is what it is. I bought the property. That way I don't have a choice in the matter. Now, public space is significant to the public. Anyway, so then getting to reinforce my concept that there are 4 delineations on your property, front and 2 sides and rear, is that on page 27 it talks about the maximum height of fences. It clearly defines 3 separate areas of any person's yard in this district. It says those that are facing the street are 3 feet high. Then it says side yards, 3 to 6 feet high. Then it says rear yards, up to 6 feet. If the authors of this only believe that the front yard is the front and everything else is rear, they never would have delineated the sides and the rear being separate, and they never would have delineated them being different than the front. So I strongly believe, as I'm reading through all of the items, and by the way, I did read through every single one of the emails, every single one of the letters that were written, and I found all of them to be compelling. They were all well written. So it is a struggle for me personally to come to a conclusion on this. It's a very hard thing to do. It really is. But for me personally, for those reasons that I just stated, I think that you need to have, personally, you need to have transparency on all 4 sides of your property based on the guidelines that I already cited. So that's my thoughts. So next then, I always have is Commissioners Open Forum. Just jump in. What are your thoughts on this? Because the next move is we need to determine from each 4 sides what we believe we want to approve. So throw in your thoughts before we go to that.
Well, the one thing I'd like to say is I would like us to look at this as to be here right now. We don't have the power to predict the future, and we shouldn't. Right here, right now, we have guidelines, we have a desire from an applicant, and we have the voice of the public. And I think we need to focus our energy on making a decision based on that, and not what could happen or might happen.
Agree.
We all agree. I agree. You agree?
To a degree. I would say I would like to explore the possibility, if there's any middle ground still, for resolution by concession. Is there anything that the city staff has suggested to you, the applicants, that you could possibly live with in terms of a baffle that's short of the property line?
So there are several different types of fences. We can agree to that. I think there is clarification that needs to be made when agreeing to any type of fence. So in the case of there are different types of privacy fences that do allow for openness, right? So there's board-on-board, but there's also alternating board where there is space in between. However, it does create a visual break. It allows for air to flow, but it doesn't allow for people to stick their faces through and look. It's very hard for a dog or an animal to put their face through, and it does provide. So we're currently in historic Old Town Alexandria. Those fences are very common in the backyards of all the historic homes there because of that. They do allow for air to move through, but they do prohibit people from directly seeing, but it does allow light to come from different angles. Are those things that we would definitely consider? Yes. But the original staff notes are for, kind of the if it's just board and there's 5 feet in between, or 5 and 6 inches, a foot in between, that's a very large gap, and that fence doesn't provide something. So I guess my statement to this is, are we amenable to compromise? Of course. But it does have to be specified what the compromise is, because there's, just saying board adjacent board doesn't really let us know, well, what can we do? And we could agree to something and then be told it has to be a foot, and a person could fit through it, right? There's a lot of gray area in there, and so to clean up that gray area would be something that we would want to do.
And I think it's important to explore that. We don't want to drive you out and have you shake the dust of Gaithersburg from your sandals. That's not our purpose at all.
And we appreciate that, right? And we are open. It's a matter of determining what that is. We use board-abutting-board because board-abutting-board was the privacy fence in there. There are several types of privacy fences that we'd be more than happy to be amenable to.
So it sounds like you are possibly open to the open board-on-board. You just would like to have it defined. I have a thought on that. Having the gap between the board and the gap in the board to be 3 and 15/16 wide. And why that matters is there's a code, the building code, the residential code, requires that no sphere of 4 inches can ever pass through a railing. If it's off the ground 3 feet or more. So to me, that would give anybody the idea that a child would be safe and not get stuck in that. So I'm fine with that being an open board on board at 3 15/16 dimension. That is just slightly under 4 inches. Is that something that you find acceptable or not?
So to clarify, that would be an open board on board with
Open board on
no
board.
privacy aspect at all.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
what I'm suggesting.
I think we would then have to see samples of that and determine whether or not that's actually going to give us privacy in our backyard. Because you're right, 3 inches is for the head of a child, but peeping eyes can handle that. And sight lines, such. That's why I suggested the alternating board, which does allow for airflow, does allow for light flow. As you're moving through, you can actually glimpse when you're on the angles of the property, but it doesn't allow for straight-on visual staring into the property. And that's why we would be more amenable to something like that, as opposed to something where there's an open gap which allows for direct line of sight from someone just sitting and staring.
Well, I'll say board on board is board on both sides. And what happens is we have one board in front of a gap, and then you go down that way. So you don't have a direct shot. A direct shot.
You guys are talking about board-abutting-board.
Yeah,
board-abutting-board is
yeah, we're not. I don't think anyone.
Offset board is like this, where there's the running of a beam in between.
It's called open.
Yeah.
There's actually a picture of it. Can we bring that up? A picture
Yeah,
of
it's
it?
on my screen right now, if tech team can show that. So we're talking
Top right,
about.
yeah, see, you can
It's
see
now
through
on
that.
27,
And that's
yeah.
what we,
Yeah, we're talking about,
as a
yeah.
historic commission, do want.
Yeah.
So
We
I-
want the openness, but we do want to have, you guys have a small sense of privacy, which you'll get from that, but also the idea where if you have pets, they can't go running wild past that. And so that's why I am supporting the idea of you guys having a fence. But I think that any one of those, except any one of those up on the screen, other than the closed board on board, give you that openness feeling. So I think that the top right might be a compromise for perhaps the community, certainly perhaps for us, and maybe yourself. If you find that to be acceptable, then we can discuss that.
I think that the statement is, to some degree, if you think that slightly under 4 inches is still too wide, what
They do, but.
Yeah, what do you think is appropriate?
So again, I'm actually not saying that the slightly under 4 inches is too wide necessarily. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I say that to say that, again, that's a great diagram. There's many different types, and whether the gap is depending on what plane your gap is on, right? So the variation between boards can be like this. The variation between boards can be like this. There's still openness. Depending on what your angle of view is, you still have openness. So we're more amenable to a slight offset between boards, and then the large majority of that board being board, and then another board. So essentially, if you think of it like having a 2x4 running between the two boards, so your vertical, your openness is actually vertical and not on the plane. I can diagram it better than I can explain
I
it.
understand what you're saying. What you're saying is it's not direct, it's on an angle. I
It's
get
on.
that. And that's what we're saying too.
Still a wall.
It's a wall.
I'm sorry?
Still a wall.
So,
There's a difference, I'll clarify, there's a difference between what's called for in the design guidelines and I believe what he is saying. What I have on my screen now is what I believe he's saying, where it's mostly, as people are saying,
Yeah,
there's no
yeah.
sight lines in between,
Yeah.
but at an angle, there's sight lines.
That's
And then I'll show
So we're not-
That is
the
also-
design guidelines, you have a board, then you have an opening, as I believe
Yeah.
Chair Ventola is saying, then you have a board, then you have an opening, on
Right.
and on. So the straight-on view, you can see into
you
the
still
yard.
can see through, you see more on an angle, but you still have some openness, and that's what is important to me.
Yeah, but you have open, but you don't have transparency. Because basically your open is on the side. You still achieve that openness on the side.
Well, if you look at the
From a
diagram-
transparency,
If you look at the diagram, there is straight-on view through, which
Okay.
the applicant is concerned about not having, but I'm thinking that I would like this to be as open as we can make it.
Yeah, I agree. Which brings me to this question. Shouldn't this have maybe been a courtesy review? Should we make a decision tonight?
I
Or
think
should
we
we
have to.
let
I think we have to.
well, if the applicants would like to postpone it till next month, they can choose to do so. And then they can think over what we've advised this evening. It's just a suggestion. Otherwise, you have a general feel for how we may vote this evening, and that's the way that will go.
I don't have any problem with us postponing it till the next meeting if we are allowed to.
Only if the
Yeah.
applicants
It's all up to
want
the
to.
applicant.
It would give them a chance to work with staff.
Okay.
Can I make
And
a
possibly.
suggestion?
Yes, by all
I'm
means.
sorry,
It's
please.
open forum,
Please.
please.
Go.
Why don't
So-
we give them the opportunity to chat about it?
No, of
That's what they're
course.
saying.
No,
She's
but I
saying
mean,
right
tonight,
now?
chat about it. We can take the second thing on the
Yeah.
agenda, dispose of it,
How
and
we
then
would do
return
it.
to this question.
Is that
Sure.
possible? We've never done that before.
I would recommend not doing that.
Because we might have to not
Can we-
close the record and all
Yeah.
that stuff. Okay.
The applicant wants to say something.
Yes.
So I'd also like to, well, two things, two separate things. The first one is, in the spirit of compromise, as we're talking about these, one design that we have not talked about is actually the bottom privacy fence with an open air on the top. It's a very common fence design. That is something that we would be amenable to. So that actually lowers the impermeable sight lines, gives us 2 feet or a foot of
We
sight
don't,
line on the
because it's not
top.
in our guidelines.
I mean, it is a compromise. It allows us for if we are playing with small children in the backyard, if we're doing things in the backyard or seated, no one can see us, but they still have open air, there's a lot more light.
I'm not familiar with what.
It's like a lattice up at the top.
Yeah, it's a lattice about this much,
That's not
yeah,
very
but
much.
it's still a wall
I mean,
and then
it's a very
lattice.
nice looking fence, but it's not very
But
much.
that openness can be as much as we deem necessary, right? If it's 2 feet of openness that you want and 3 feet or 2 feet and 4 feet, or, some variation thereof, just because there's a standard doesn't mean that we can't be willing to discuss, how much of that is, and again, we're trying to retain privacy, but also have openness. And so we are willing to have openness on the top of the fence and have privacy on the bottom of the fence.
Well, if the bottom part is board on board and the top part is lattice, I find that acceptable. But open board on board, I'm sorry, not closed board on board. Open board on board. I still believe, me personally, still believe that you should have openness in this fence or no fence at all. That's my belief.
Well, I guess back to the question about the open board on board, are we talking just so it's, opposite sides but still tight, or are you still talking about the?
Similar to the drawing. I mean, if you can put the drawing back up, it's the top right. I'm so sorry.
Can I make a quick clarification about?
Well, hold on a second, please, hold on a second. Public comment is closed, so is it inappropriate to take public comment at this point in time?
Yes, it is.
Okay, forgive us, but no, public comment is already closed. Right now, we're in discussion with, the commission itself is in the mode of deciding what we're going to be doing. And so we are asking questions of the applicant to help us further conclude where we're going with this. So I'm sorry, but no public comment at this point.
If I could offer maybe a
Yes, sir.
solution. Don't want to speak out of turn, but it sounds like the commission may be amenable to the front fence with the 3-foot picket fence that they've already recommended.
That's a great suggestion because I think we all are, but what are your thoughts?
No, Chris answered my question, so I'm okay with that.
So yeah, how about Mary Jo, you're okay with the front, right?
Yes.
You as well? I as well, yes.
The reason
That's
I
a
bring
very
that
good
up is the commission does have the ability as well to maybe approve this fence tonight with the condition that the rear fence has to come back to the commission at the next meeting or a subsequent meeting for their review. That will allow them to continue to work with staff on that rear fence, but would also allow them to proceed forward with the fence permit for the front fence while working with staff on
Well,
that.
okay, but let me ask you, when you say front fence, are you talking about just the front?
The 3-foot picket fence.
On the front property line?
As well as the one maybe wrapped around the side, but I would leave that to the applicant to see how they would like that.
So the side property?
Yeah.
When I looked at the photos of the insets, it did not appear to me that the side yards
There
were
was a
anything.
blue dot for the
I have it up.
3
Yeah, we're
foot
gonna
for the
put it
side,
up.
a red dot for the 6 foot.
Yeah.
All right, so let me just ask this question then. Are we saying that the front property line, the left property line, side property line, and the right side property line are all the picket fence?
Not the whole way back to the front of it, to the face of the house.
Oh, yeah.
If
so
you're
that's what
looking
I'm
at the
going
monitors-
See, I still don't, I do not believe, I personally do not believe that the rear yard starts at the face of the house. I do not believe in that.
If you're looking at the monitor that's in front of you now, the blue line where the cursor is moving is the proposed 3-foot tall picket fence.
Right. Right.
So it does wrap around slightly towards the rear of the house, but if you again draw imaginary lines from the front of the building, the residency as well as the detached garage is visually within the front yard.
Right, and again, I already stated, I don't believe that the rear yard starts at the front of the property. I believe that there are 4 sides to this, based on my interpretation of the guidelines. As I already mentioned, they specify the front, the rear, and the sides all have different requirements.
Let me ask you this, are you objecting to those fences, the 3-foot picket fence as highlighted on the diagram?
No, I'm objecting that they don't go far enough on the sides.
Well, yeah, but that's not, I mean, but that's kind of what Greg was kind of saying, let's approve where we are in agreement, and then we can agree to come back later to that.
I'm fine with that, but that's not what I understood he's saying, but maybe hold on, because he said just rear yard we're going to consider. So here's our question to you, my question. We are, I think all of us are open to approving the picket fence, hold on a second, that wraps around half on the side yard, quarter on the other side, and along the front. It sounds like we are ready to approve that tonight, but then we would like to define at a different meeting the back end of the right-hand side yard, backhand left, the left part of the side yard, and the rear yard. We would like to consider that another time, because I personally think that, like I already said, I think that the side yards are not part of the front yard.
So to clarify, are you talking about, again, the blue line that's depicted on the applicant's application?
I just saw yellow right now,
well,
wrapping
it was
3
marked as
sides.
yellow, but that, again, I'm just trying to get clarity, obviously.
I think we can approve that tonight.
Okay.
The 3 sides that are marked as yellow, if the applicant was the one who did it, whomever did it, whoever did it, excuse me, I believe that we are ready to approve that, it sounds like. We're going to take a vote on it, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like all of us are okay with that. Can we put up the yellow lined drawing?
No, that's wrong. Okay, that's the wrong thing. Where's the newest one? I guess I can pull this one.
I think we need to ask the applicant whether they're amenable to delaying that back portion.
Hard, small,
I think I understand,
I
believe I understand what the commission is stating on that. It's kind of a smaller image, but
yes,
that
right
area,
now,
which was the recommended 3-foot tall picket fence.
I'm believing that that is a 3-foot tall picket fence that I think that we would all approve tonight. That's my understanding. We're going to go to a vote, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I'm understanding. So now, the applicant, is that something that you would find troublesome if we approved that tonight and then postponed the other parts for the next meeting? Is that something you would be acceptable to you?
That is. Can I make
yes,
one?
You did.
Yeah, and I apologize.
Like no, please do. Please do.
So I just want to be clear, because this is in the guidelines, and with all due respect, it does state within the guidelines that the front or rear corner, it does actually depict in diagrams where the front of the house is, what is considered the front, the rear, and the back of the home. So it could be that the guidance is misleading and kind of contradictory, but the diagrams in there do differentiate that the back of the home for the purpose of or the rear yard for the purpose of the document does begin at the front corner of the property. So it does, within the historic guidelines, lay that out.
Where is that?
It's on page 28.
Oh, sorry, I have it up on the page. The screen.
I looked, I did not see it.
Page 28, yeah.
Page 28, the second bullet, the fence or hedge
It's the
placement.
acceptable, the preferred is to put it in the back, and it's acceptable to put it in.
Behind the house, acceptable at the front corner, not acceptable at the front.
But I think what we were saying earlier is that because this is an open property that's also connected to, but only separated by a property line.
That's the incongruence with the Brooks Russell Walker District.
Right, that's it, but for the street.
No, I understand.
Dean, you may want to ask the property owners if they would consider continuation of the picket fence.
We just did. They said they're going to tell us.
Oh, I'm
We
sorry,
just
I
did.
missed that.
That's okay. No, he was saying before I say.
So we are admissible to the picket fence in the front of the yard being approved, and then tabling the discussion on the backyard fence for the next meeting. There's one thing I would ask of the committee, and I know it didn't really get talked about, but I think it is kind of pertinent, which is to go and review. We've talked a lot about the congruent nature of the property, and we agree we want that. I think one important piece is to remember, and I know I said it kind of in a whole bunch of other stuff, the property was owned by the city at one point. The city does have at its disposal something called a historic easement, which does allow for, in the historic easement documentation, it talks about the environment of the land. The city had the option to include a historic easement on the back half of this property, which would have then basically taken away all of our rights of putting a fence, period, because it could have ensured the rights of people to be able to walk around the old buildings. It could have ensured the rights of people to see all the old buildings, because the words, the environment, are placed in there. The city at that time chose not to do that. And although it's painful to think about, that does draw a line between the two parcels. And that was done in 2011, and the city had the full authority to do that at that time.
I can clarify some of that information. Actually, the city has never owned that property up until recently. It was actually owned by the developer, and then as part of the annexation and the development of the Crown neighborhood, it was provided to the city.
Well, but to my point, at one point the city did own the property, and
The city never owned the property.
oh, the city never owned.
Never.
We just recently acquired it.
Oh, that piece.
Mhm.
Okay.
And we've never owned the manor house.
But to be in point, so you've never owned the manor house at all. But there was a large conversation that took place around the annexation of all the property that is now the Crown. Several development plans, several planning board meetings. Was there ever a discussion about ensuring that there was a historic easement placed on that house for the express purpose of maintaining the continuity between the two pieces?
That is the existing historic designation that covers both parcels and the outbuildings.
Right, but my question pertains to the fact that there is a separate historic easement designation that allows for exactly this. It says, it provides in law in Montgomery County the ability for a historic easement to be put in place to allow people to walk and enjoy the environment. And so my question is, did the city throughout this whole process discuss the placement of a historic easement in there?
So,
and that's not to deliberate now. That's something that has to go back and look through all the documents and determine if in any of the processes of building out Crown, the city at any point approached the developer or anybody else to say, we're doing all this, we want to make the Crown farm, we want to make sure it's contiguous, we want to make sure that we have this. Was there ever an attempt, even an attempt, to create this historic easement on this property? And I think that that's actually a really important piece that we haven't talked about, just because it, as much as we want to say it's all one, if there was never a discussion about a historic easement throughout the documents, we have to start to consider, we want it to be, but is there a reason why, or was there a missed opportunity to create this and have it be an open place? Again, it's not to deliberate here, it's to go back and for us all to do our research to determine if it was ever an option laid on the table. And if not, why not? And if so, why was it rejected?
The only thing I can say about that is that the entire parcel is historic. It's been deemed historic. And so when they defined it as historic property, it's the building and the land. And so I'm not sure.
And appearances, everything.
It would have occurred to anybody to put anything further, any other restrictions upon that, because the restrictions are complete by doing that.
So they're used in Montgomery County, though, on several other parcels to ensure that the public has the access to a private residence or a private piece of land.
But they never intended that, I don't think. I don't think that they ever said this can't be sold to a private person, but...
Right, easements don't prohibit sale, they flow with each sale.
Right, and so
in perpetuity forever.
Forever, and so the placement of actually I think that the point that's being made is actually a very good one for this, that it is a private residence and the purpose of the easement is to be placed on a private residence to ensure certain things, including the environmental feel of the land, and that is actually included in the text for the Montgomery historical easements.
Like,
so,
for example, say the storm drain easement that runs across the front of pretty much everyone's property in the Crown. runs the land, and it allows people related to the storm drain to come and do the work. So the city could have done a similar public easement in the back, allowing any of the public to have access.
And it doesn't have
And
to
that, it would still be private property, just like it's private property to have a storm drain easement.
It's just that you can build on it.
It's just that you can't do certain
You can
things,
do
right?
certain
So,
things on it.
and they're very explicit on saying.
And
you can-
easements are of all kinds.
If I can add something. Number one, I don't think Montgomery County easements apply to Gaithersburg Historic Districts. Number one. Number two, according to the Montgomery County Code, Section 24A-13 Historic Preservation Easement Program, an owner of a historic resource may offer the county a preservation easement and has to submit an application. So it's not even the government's responsibility to request that easement. It can only grant that easement upon application by a property owner. That's beside the point. I don't think Montgomery County even applies to this since it's in Gaithersburg.
It does not. The city has zoning authority, so Montgomery County may have, as City Attorney Perla stated, as other type of designation. The city does not have that. The historic designation that's on the property now is the highest level of designation the city can offer for a property.
With all due respect, there are Montgomery County historical easements within the city of Gaithersburg.
There are not.
They actually have one listed on their website. If you're on their website right now, if you scroll down, there's one that is in Gaithersburg. At least its address is Gaithersburg.
Within the city of Gaithersburg or just?
We're the city limits of
Gaithersburg proper?
Gaithersburg. The zip.
We have to map it.
I'm sorry?
We have to map it. I don't have
We
this.
are new residents.
We are new
Yeah.
residents.
There is the Gaithersburg zip code is larger than the city's municipality boundaries. So it is possible they could have somebody that has a Gaithersburg address, but it may not be actually in the city.
Okay. I mean, and again, it's not to be deliberated, it's to be considered and to look into, right? I mean, that's what we're discussing here.
I think, back to if we are amenable to our discussion, back to what we can approve and what we are planning to table, what would be helpful, I think, for us, when you come back to us is, I think, samples. If you bring actual samples of what you're considering, I think that would be very helpful. That way everybody can see visually the transparency versus the opaqueness, and make sure we're all on the same page, because I think that's going to be something that's critically important for everybody to compromise.
Good point, but I can say that my gut feel is if it's not very transparent, it will not fly.
Yeah, but I think also there's gray areas with what we're talking about, because if we're talking about the open board and board, and this is going to be a little bit. If you're talking about the open space, are we talking about the hypotenuse, or are we talking about just the open space, like staring at? Because 3 and 5, like slightly under 4 inches, could be hypotenuse, which is actually closer to that, which may, it's.
No, my point, and I understand the question, and the applicant did bring up that question. My point is that from one side of the board the open board on board, I am proposing 3 and 15/16.
Straight on.
Gap. Then what happens is you have these two pieces here, they're a little bit wider, and then you have another one on the other side doing the same thing. So if you look at the diagram, you'll see it. The top right diagram, you can bring that up.
I think
you can see.
I'm misinterpreting what you're saying then.
Yeah.
Well, here's the diagram will show it, because it shows, if you look at the boards themselves.
Yeah. So you're talking about from.
If you look at the boards themselves, just look at the boards themselves. Now look at the horizontal rails.
Yeah.
You can see one board is in front.
Yes.
The alternate one is in back.
Yeah.
The other one is in front. The
Yeah.
alternate is in back.
And
To me, that gives an open feel, but it also, to me, doesn't allow people to walk on your property,
Yeah.
doesn't allow your dogs to run off, come on or run off. So to me, that's open, and I like the idea if we then use the lattice work on top to lower the open board on board, then I would vote for that.
So what are you talking about with your distance? Is it from the one side to or is it from the front? Like, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Well, in that particular case, I would say that would you guess these are 4-inch wide boards or 6?
It's impossible to know, but say for sake of argument, 4 inch.
I think,
All right, well, then it looks to me that if those are 4s, then it looks like there's an 1.5 inch, maybe 2 inch gap between the next alternate board. So you'll have a wider gap in between, but you will only get a straight on with like an 1.5 inch or 2 inches.
Yeah, that's something we're amenable to. We thought you were talking about a 4 inch gap between the boards, which without the board behind.
Straight on.
Straight on.
Yep.
A straight on 4 inch gap is different than an 1.5 inch and an 1.5 inch. That we're amenable to.
Well, this particular one, the open board on board, is looking like it's more than, between two boards, it looks like it's probably 6 or 8 inches from board to board on one side.
Yeah.
And the same on the other.
You're right.
Yeah. Which again, that's open enough visually, I would think, particularly if you do the lattice work on the top. I really like that suggestion of yours. I'm all for that. So, because that'll lower the
profile.
if you could do the upper part at 2 feet and the lower part at 4, I would vote for that. I would get my support.
Why not keep the whole 6 feet? I mean, you're creating this rhythm, this consistent pattern of offsetting and having a gap between. It's a rhythm. You just keep the whole thing 6 feet instead of having.
Because the lattice work to some degree is explicitly not called out for. Granted that I know the guidelines are the guidelines, but what we're proposing is specific to allowed in the guidelines.
Well, I'm open to that too then, okay, sure.
We'd be open to that.
Yeah, but we've never actually seen lattice work on that type.
Yeah.
So we're not sure how that would look.
We were trying to work
And again, we care about aesthetics.
That's what we're going to put off till next time.
So if I could recommend a condition of approval, then it sounds like the commission is amenable to the 3-foot fence along the front yard as we discussed. Instead of condition number 1 that's in the staff analysis, I would probably say we should amend that to the board-abutting-board fence along the entire rear of the yard is denied, and that the applicant must coordinate and return to the Historic District Commission at a subsequent meeting for approval of a redesign that is compatible with the surrounding historic resources.
But here's my understanding on a motion that we adopt. If it's denied, any portion of it, they have to come back in a year. So
that would be if the whole historic area work permit is denied, I would say, not a portion of the actual historic area work permit.
That's correct.
Okay.
And also they're changing what was initially proposed. So if they come back with a different kind of application, then it's fine.
And I would like to make sure the applicant would be okay with that condition and coming back at a later meeting.
Are we not allowed to just agree with what you're saying? No.
You always are.
Well, we like to, I want it to be specific so we understand exactly.
I would say that, if you want.
Conditional
approval.
Of
what
exactly
you
what you're
suggested with the 1.5 inch, the board, the board behind, whatever that is.
Open board.
I'll get it one of these days, I promise. We're definitely amenable to that, and if we need it to be conditioned to work out the fine details with staff, we're more than happy to do that.
I was going to say the other option is you could condition it that they work with staff on that design.
That's up to you guys.
We would like it to be architecturally appropriate too.
It's up to the commission how you guys want to proceed with it. You can have it come back to you at a subsequent meeting, or they can work with staff.
I think for the sake of the community, because they're so interested in this, I think it should come back before us. But that's up to you guys. We can vote on that separately. That's a separate vote if you guys, let me ask this, is anybody opposed to that? Say no.
No, I'm not opposed.
All right.
I think it's better to make sure we're all speaking the same language.
In respect to all, the applicant and the community, yes. Okay, good, all right.
And just clarified, everything's understood about what you would be coming back with at the next meeting?
Yes, we prefer not to. In all honesty, we'd rather just get this. I am dealing with family matters which make me travel a lot, so I prefer not to have to come back to this meeting, in all honesty. I'd rather say that we're going to agree to this style of fence and work with staff and move forward. As we have both stated, this has been, in a already very trying time in our lives, a more trying endeavor. It's been very emotional. If you read all the email correspondence, you would know it's been very emotional. And so to say that we now have to wait another month, it's another month of us going through this without being able to move forward. We would prefer to just work conditionally with staff on the design that we have just talked about and all agreed to to make that happen.
Well, you can, from what I understand, where we are currently thinking of going, you can do that front fence now if we do approve it tonight. It's the back sides and rear that we'd like you to come back for. I personally believe, out of respect for the 65 signatures and the people who have attended, that we should make sure that we do our, cross our T's and dot our I's to respect the wishes of the openness, and therefore put our eyes on the actual fence that we're approving. That's me personally, but we have 5 people here.
I think so too.
So do you okay with that thought, to have them come back again?
I would agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, but I
Me
think it's
too.
best that we make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Now, hopefully it'll be a quality product everyone can be happy with,
And
at
hopefully it
least
can be
mostly.
quickly discussed.
Right?
Yeah.
Good, all right. So, any other thoughts before we go to a motion?
Just to make sure that not just samples of materials, but photographs are fine too. Anything you can add to the record before the meeting, because we always get our packet, it has everything in it.
I would also,
I'm
I'm sorry to interrupt, I apologize.
okay.
I would also like you to do a drawing, even if it's you drawing it, draw it with the dimensions shown of what you're going to propose. Show each board what the size is and what the gap is, but look at the open board on board on that, on the guidelines. That's what I personally am looking for.
So for clarification, we are basing this off of the general consensus that we're hearing, which is open board on board, or
Yes.
open board on board with approximately 1.5 to 2 inches in between the two boards.
Yes.
Okay.
In
I mean,
between-
the open air gap.
The open air gap, yes, you'll see on the drawing.
Yep.
Yes.
No, I just want to make sure that we're talking
We're
about
speaking the same.
where the open
Yes,
air
we
gap.
are. Yes, we are.
Because it will, to bring in all the materials to do samples, it does cost, and we don't want to do something that we're crossing in the wind.
A sketch would do.
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Mark, are you looking for the actual?
I mean, I think
material?
it's, I mean, if it is, I know supply chain and everything, it's very hard to sometimes get materials, so if you can't get material, a sketch is fine.
Yeah.
If it's dimension sketch, but I prefer, I think for clarity's sake, I prefer to get the material if you can get a sample.
I mean, this will be a custom fence, to be all honest, so I'm going to have to build a custom piece of fence to bring in. I mean, I just want to make that clear, right? This isn't, we are doing something and trying to work,
Yeah.
but what we're trying to work with will become a custom product. So there is that issue that goes along with it.
I might be the only one confused, but when you say material, you just want to see a small section, or you want to see the wood?
A small section of mock-up with the connection, with the couple verticals with the horizontal, just showing that.
Actual wood?
Yeah.
I mean,
It does, I mean, we could.
It has to be a wood fence.
I mean, no, but I mean, are you talking about like a
For the
styrofoam
mock-up.
scale model, or?
Well, that, I was just
That's what she's
asking.
asking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be, I mean, the closer we can get to
We
the
have to buy
actual.
the material, so
The
I
closer we
don't
can
know.
get to the actual material, the better.
Yeah.
If you can't get that, then.
But it can be like a scaled down.
So if I cut some plywood and make it out of plywood boards that are that size, you'll understand that obviously it won't be a plywood
have
fence.
the profile and the dimension.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, sounds good.
Do for your own sake, determine what actual wood you can buy off the shelf, because a 6-inch board is not 6 inches, it's 5.5. So just for your own sake,
Yeah.
do yourself justice by doing the actual dimension that you can buy off the shelf. Otherwise, anything we approve that you have to get custom.
Yeah, no.
Is gonna be what you got.
No,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
will
so-
go with that,
So
definitely.
I'm just giving you a heads up on that.
Yeah.
Like 1x6s is probably, that's readily available, obviously.
Yeah,
That's
I mean-
probably what this fence would be made of.
But to that point, right, I can probably grab a 1x6 pine board very easily.
Yeah.
It won't be a pine fence, probably, because
Right.
that would disintegrate pretty quickly. So, obviously there'll be
Right.
that discrepancy with materials.
Did we talk about materials?
I mean, it will be painted white wood.
What kind of wood?
I
Sorry.
mean, we defer to the builder on that one. Usually it's a pressure treated board. I mean, if there's a desire for it not to be, I think that's the standard due to rot and everything else. It's the standard, and since it will be painted white, it will have a white veneer, and really what it is underneath won't make much of a difference.
I don't think we can do pressure treated.
Well, is pressure treated a part of our purview, or is that really just the city?
I think it falls into aesthetics, so I think it's perfectly within your purview.
Okay.
There are, I mean, Yeah, that's,
Okay. Well, you know pressure treated can't be painted for 6 months.
exactly.
That's correct.
Yeah.
No painted pressure treated.
It'll take a while.
I mean,
I believe work permits extend for some time, though, no?
yeah.
Well, cedar you can paint.
Yeah.
But to that point, the work permit is good for,
Permit's good for 6 months.
the
2
permit is
years.
good for 6
So
months.
it can
So
be-
in
the
theory,
work
we
can
can put
be
the fence
done.
in and paint it on the last day of the permit, and we've made it 6
There's,
months.
I-
there's
I will
other,
rephrase
there's other
that.
woods other than pressure treated, like cedar
But-
and what else, redwood.
When I say 6 months, just to clarify, I mean the fence permit itself. The hop's actually good for 2 years.
So, again, I mean,
There's time.
putting in a big fence,
Yeah.
money is always an issue. If the fence is gonna be white, does the base material really matter if we're gonna be able to paint it within the timeline? That's just an honest question.
Well, I think it'll be, if you do pressure treated, we have to allow you to paint it in 6 months because you can't not.
Yeah.
So we have to have that. But come back with the materials next month, what materials you're going to be using, and we'll put that into the approval. Like if it's pressure treated, we'll say that the approval extends for 6 months afterwards to paint it. What else can we do? Okay, good. Did we?
We need a motion, right?
Yeah. Did we beat this guy up enough? This poor horse enough? Okay, so I'm open to a motion to
Anybody?
approve
Somebody?
part and to postpone the other part.
Well, I think Greg already said some of that. Do I have to repeat everything?
I can
that
read
you
the staff
said?
recommended motion into the record if you'd like, and then you.
Please.
Yes. Staff recommends that the Historic District Commission, based on the exhibits submitted, the applicant's testimony, and the staff report findings and recommendation, grant HIST 9232-2022, installation of fencing, finding in compliance with sections 24-227.2 of the city code, with 3 conditions, with number 1 being being amended as stated earlier.
Excellent. So what's left?
And I can reread
As
number 1
stated-
if you would like me to.
As stated earlier, please reread it for me.
The board-abutting-board fence along the entire length of the rear yard is denied. The applicant must coordinate with staff and return to the Historic District Commission at a subsequent meeting for approval of a new redesigned fence that is compatible with the surrounding historic resources.
For the rear yard property line as well as the 2 side yard property lines.
Yes.
Okay.
Again, my understanding is the commission is okay with the 3-foot picket fence, so that would be approved tonight. The entirety of the
Yeah, if they
board-abutting-board
put
fence
that,
would not be.
if they put that on all 4 sides, they already have approval from tonight to do that. Yes. Okay, so the motion has been made. Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No.
Just to clarify who made the
5-0.
motion.
I'm sorry, what?
Just to
Jo.
clarify who made the motion for the record.
Mary Jo.
That was
I
Mary Jo.
move, that's right.
Didn't you? Do you want to do it and we'll vote again? Say, do the full motion?
I think a simple I move as read into the record would be sufficient.
Do that?
I move as read into the record.
Okay, and so let's vote on it again. Second?
Second.
All right, let's vote again.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Passes, motion passes 5-0. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, that
Thank
was a
you,
bigger one than
The
usual.
public, thank you very much. Everything everybody said tonight had value.
Thank all of you so much for coming and participating. We appreciate it.
6-foot wall. Still a 6-foot wall. And there were 4 of you said you didn't want a wall. And then you changed your mind.
I'm going fast across. I got the stuff. Will you grab my coat, please?
No, I got it. We've already voted.
Unfortunately, we compromised.
We talked about compromise.
Completely
That's
happy.
right, that's good. Okay, all right.
Remember that.
Okay, very good. Next then is, moving on. We have the second hall. Hello? Could you kindly, everybody can you kindly take your conversation outside? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right,
Good night.
very good. Next then, we have the second hop, which is HIST 92-33-2022, concrete paving at 108 Russell Avenue in the R90 medium-density residential zone. May we have introduction from staff, please?
Yes, the subject property was built in 1936 and is non-contributing to the Brooks, Russell, and Walker Historic District. The application comes before the HDC in accordance with Section 24-227A of the City Code. Because it is non-contributing to the district, according to Section 24-227.2B, The commission shall be lenient in its judgment on plans for structures of little historical or design significance or for plans involving new construction, unless such plans would seriously impair the historic or architectural significance of surrounding historic resources. And we have the neighborhood design guidelines that apply here. And the last bullet under driveways, alleys, and walkways reads that lead walks from public sidewalks or driveways should be constructed of concrete, brick, or tar and chip, slate/flagstone are acceptable but not preferred. So the applicant seeks approval to replace the existing stone walk, which is right here, with a 3-foot wide concrete walk measuring 87 square feet total. They also would like to install a 3-foot wide concrete walk from the front walk to the driveway. So here's the driveway here, here's that connection. They would also like to install a 3-foot wide concrete walk from the driveway all the way to the back of the house at the new patio. And they also want to build a brand new patio that measures 480 square feet at the back of the house. And in that process, they'd also like to remove the existing patio, which is at the side property line here. And we'll go through these with a series of photos. So here's the front of the house. You can partially see the stone walk right here, partially see the stones, stepping stones that lead to the driveway right now. And here's a closer view of that front stone walk. You can see there's a step. That will be eliminated, and instead it will slowly slope up. And here's the stepping stones to the driveway. Here's another view. This is from the front porch, so you're looking to the sidewalk in the street here. And here's another view of it. Here's another angle standing on the driveway. Here's the walk right now. Again, closer view of it. And here we go. We're going around from the driveway to the fence. And here's that view where we were standing or showing in the previous photo. Here's the driveway here. Here's the stepping stones. Stepping stones extend through the gate into the backyard. And this is the area that there's a partial concrete area paved here, but additional area will be paved to form a patio. Here's a wider view that shows that area. Here's a wider view. My apologies to the applicant who didn't want to be in these photos. And here's the existing pad that will be removed.
That has to be.
And joining us tonight, we have Ms. Susan Zanner, the property owner and the applicant. If you have anything to say, can you please come to the podium and add anything else you'd like to?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Roddy, for your comments. It's nice to see you all. I've seen you on TV, and I've heard your names for years and years. I'm so proud to be Mary Ward's homeowner, and because Mary Ward owned that house. She actually built the house, from my understanding. I'm just trying to make the surrounding area safer. I'm getting older, my friends are getting older, and it's really hard to maneuver. And my dad had such trouble with that front step. And so I don't even use the front myself. I always use around the back so the animals don't run out into the traffic. But I think it's really important to try to have some kind of safety, and those stones that I put out there going to the back aren't very safe. So that's really my motivation.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on behalf, for or against this application? And the room has been cleared out. Is there anyone on Zoom?
I see no one available on Zoom.
Okay, before we go too much further, can we go to the drawing or the photo that shows the layout? It's an aerial?
Yes.
And it's got the, yeah. For me, other than the back patio, nothing to me is defined graphically. So I'm of the thought that it has to be drawn before we even know what we're approving.
Well, the applicant provided a rough drawing, but what I would advise you to use is the stepping stones. The stepping stones form the proximity of exactly where the paving will be, and that is what we will use as a guide.
If you guys are fine with that, I'm fine with it, but to me, it's not defined. If the path is wider than we thought, or at a different angle than we thought, or many other possibilities, then we've approved something in advance that we don't see. That's my only thought. But I'm open to whatever you guys want.
I agree with you.
Yeah, the only reason I would be a little more lenient with this is if I'm correct, this is a non-contributing resource.
That is correct. If the chair would feel more comfortable, we can add a condition that a more detailed plan is provided to staff before approval, certification of these plans.
That's a good point, because if you guys are okay with it, I guess I am as well.
If this was contributing, it would be a different story.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So good. All right, I'm fine with that. So let's go through, starting with Commissioner Roddy.
I have no questions or comments.
Okay, Commissioner LaFrance.
I'm same.
Commissioner Feinstein.
Same.
Commissioner Morgan.
I think I'd like the recommendation to approve, but more detail will come. Because, I mean, you're taking out the stone and you're putting concrete. I would like to see detailed. I'd like to see the base, the sub-base. I want to see, you know, more than what is shown on this photograph.
Okay, so not just a plan drawing, you want a quick section?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be required as part of the site development permit, which I understand the applicant, Zanner, has been in coordination with our site development coordinator, Greg Ryberg. I spoke to him today, and he was awaiting an update on this before he approved his plan. So he would have those details on the paving details.
Okay.
Okay. Did you want to make a comment?
I just had a question as to how we draw, who would draw because my drawing wasn't sufficient.
I can assist you. I can assist you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And anything further, Commissioner Morgan?
No.
Okay, so I'm next and last, and I have no concerns. Seven. All right, so I'm open to a motion to approve this with conditions.
Yeah, I move that we approve the, utilize the staff recommended approval with the condition that the final layout, width of the walkways, configuration of the walkways are approved by staff prior to moving forward.
And may I add, as well as a section?
Section, exactly. Sorry, Rick.
Okay, second. Good. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. 5-0. Passes. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be in contact.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for your patience.
I
Extreme
learned a
patience.
lot. I was ready to show them my fence.
There you go.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, if I'm not mistaken, next is from staff, and that is Eric.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
I am going to be presenting an amended.
Did you say quickly presenting? Did you say
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
You can
I
present
will-
it.
Don't worry, I'll make it quick.
I'm teasing.
I am presenting a amended rules of procedure for the HDC tonight. Based on my understanding, the commission can open it for a motion and accept the amended rules of procedure without an actual resolution. So I'm going to go forward with an explanation. A lot of the highlighted and crossed out language is simply formatting and changing the citation type to the correct citation used as far as legal citations are concerned. If we go down to page
Don't have page numbers, but is that the blue line?
Yeah, the blue, yeah.
Yep.
In this page, this is the major amendment to the rules of procedure. It's essentially a revision that includes the hearing rules governing cross-examination of witnesses. The prior cross-examination language lacked certain due process safeguards that protect and uphold the ability of hearing participants to actually conduct effective cross-examination. The new proposed language will ensure that the HDC provides suitable cross-examination standards that avoid virtual-based lines of questioning. Cross-examination that's conducted virtually typically does not permit examiners the ability to effectively question witnesses on the exhibits presented by applicants. The new rule requires parties intending to conduct cross-examination to provide the HDC with a written request. And in order to ensure, and the blue was added after the yellow, the reason it was added was to ensure that the general public that intends to have that line of questioning is given notice of their requirement to provide written notice or written request to the HDC. And that notice will be included in the general notice of the hearing. And that does it.
Oh, that was quick.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else from Eric?
Nope.
How about Chris?
I do have one thing. This is our last meeting for our alternate, Olivier.
Yes. Why did you leave us?
Well, if you'd like to
You
come
don't
to
have
the
to
podium.
answer it.
Yeah,
If you'd
You
like
don't
to
have
come to
to
the
it's a
podium.
little complicated.
Olivier,
Come to the podium.
Sorry.
And by the way, we already miss you a little bit.
I'd like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity. Obviously, there's been change on my side family-wise. Family is expanding. It takes a lot more time. In COVID times, being vice president of research development in a company that do lateral flow assay, work have been picking up, which is a good thing. So even tonight, I came here straight from work. I think it become difficult to judge both family, this, and extracurricular item. So I'm going to pass this time. And I'm happy to hear that actually the next person is also from my street and also someone I know that will definitely do a good job as well as alternate. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity. And whenever I get a little break, I'm sure I'll be back, join the lines, and try to help a little bit in our district.
Terrific. It was
Thanks.
great having you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much, and best of
Thank you.
luck.
Okay. Anything more for
I guess I'll continue on what he was saying. His replacement, if it's hard, it's impossible to replace Olivier, but if it is possible, Kathleen Ramirez, she's the owner of 31 Walker. And she's appeared before the commission before. She has a legal background, so Commissioner Roddy has a fellow lawyer on the board.
More lawyers, good.
And she was approved by the mayor and council on Monday. Her tenure takes effect in April, so she'll be joining us.
Wonderful.
As the alternate.
And she missed all tonight's excitement.
She missed all tonight's excitement.
Lucky her.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Greg? Is he here? He's gone. He's gone?
Greg's gone.
Gone. Oh, Greg, you're not going to say anything then. You lose your place in line. All right, next then, anything from the commissioners? I was going to start with Olivier, but I think you already spoke. Anything further other than goodbye, and we miss you already?
Not much. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
Dean, did you
John?
want to take action on the,
Oh, were we supposed to vote on that tonight? I'm sorry. Were we?
it was
supposed
a
to vote on it?
possibility.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. I think you did say that. Let's just talk about it. Does anybody have any concerns? There's just one line item.
I don't have concerns. I just have a question, and I hate to prolong this, so I apologize to everybody. Can you give a real world example of how this would work?
That's a great point, because I was thinking, you know what? It doesn't hurt us to add it, but what the heck? When would this occur?
So I believe the request was made by staff during the COVID, when we would have the half in-person, half virtual hearings. And if we were here in person and we required examining parties to appear virtually, it would be really hard to have them cross-examine due to the technological difficulties between showing them the exhibits and all of that. I don't know if at this point it's necessary, since we're coming back to in person, but again, we never know.
You never know.
So when you say the cross-examining, isn't that something you're saying we typically conduct when we talk and ask questions? Well, we just went through 2 years of the virtual, and we didn't see any concerns.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, why is it, not that I care, but why would it be something they want to put in now?
It was a request by...
It was a request by planning staff that we just want to cover our bases legally.
Okay. And
Are you guys expecting a new pandemic or something?
Hopefully not.
Thank you. Good.
But there's always another one around the corner.
Well, I'll tell you, if you look at all the things that happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and they were back to back,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is crazy. But so, yes, I have no problem with that, of my personal self.
Eric, one
No,
quick
let's hit
thing.
them one at a time, so go ahead.
When it says to be taken under oath, is there an implied oath that is always, like, whenever someone testifies, or are we supposed?
I saw
What does
saw
that mean?
in the actual, in our rule, in existing rules, that any opposing parties should give testimony under oath. And when I looked at it through YouTube videos past, I never saw that you guys required an oath, but I believe that for future hearings, it would, anybody that is coming up to the podium should be required to take an oath. Sometimes in the past, I've seen courts typically give a blanket oath and have anybody that that intends to testify or provide an opposition to raise the right hand and give the oath. And
Well, that goes for the applicants as well.
correct, yeah, everyone that testifies.
We've never done that.
We've never
been
done that,
doing this
exactly,
for
that's why I was curious.
11 or 12 years now.
Yeah.
We've never done that.
Yeah.
Is that something we need to start to do?
I think that it supports or prevents appealability.
Interesting.
Because, you know, if someone comes back and says that it wasn't done under oath, then.
You've never been appealed.
Well,
hopefully.
So he's the first.
You just jinxed it.
Oh, I did, didn't I? All right, well, I guess you write something up. I mean, what do I discuss it at the beginning of every meeting and have anybody who's going to speak do it at the beginning?
I would think
You
that
should
would
probably put part of your opening.
Yeah, okay, so write that up for me.
Sure.
Be happy to do
I
it.
would just like to say, some of you may or may not know that I serve on the Animal Control Board, and that is done far differently in the quasi-judicial way. The lady that's our chair absolutely handles it like a courtroom.
Really?
Yeah, and you have the defendant and the city on this
Really?
side. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So,
Well, but
and
You
we
put your
swear.
hand- you put
It's
your
the
hand-
animal
We
control.
swear
It's
everyone
the
in.
animal control.
Yeah.
That has higher legal consequences because of the safety issue, I would think. So I think that would need a more judicial process. We don't deal with life and death over here.
Yeah.
They do.
Well, there's definitely questioning of witnesses,
Well-
swearing in, leaving people out here
Yeah.
because they can't be exposed to the testimony. The whole
Interesting.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, for that's what I'm saying. I don't
Yeah.
know if we have that concern here, but nevertheless, we're going to be putting it in.
All right.
Okay, all right, so that was your turn, Mary Jo?
So I'm ready for it.
Could we have
Turn.
a, could we have a
That's what I
motion
was
to
trying
approve
say.
the updates to the rules of procedure?
Yeah.
Thank you for keeping me focused. All right, so can we have a motion to approve the revised rules of procedure?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? 5-0. Congratulations.
Good job, Eric.
Yay.
Well, you're first.
Hey.
That's right, the first victory. Good. You got 2 in one night because you got the hearing. So, all right. So that's great. And next, then, so we went to Olivier, Mary Jo, John. Would you like to say anything from the commission?
No.
Okay. Mark,
No.
Rudy,
No.
I as well. We are hereby adjourned. All right,